Who am I? Identity and individuality crisis. You look into a mirror, deep into your eyes. There, a pair of eyes stare back at you, a face, skin that carries the traces of time. But who are you? Is what you see truly you, or just a reflection representing you? Perhaps one of humanity's greatest crises begins here: identity. The question of who we are cannot be answered simply with a name, an ID card, or a profession. So, who are you? Are you your name? The place you live? The heritage passed down from your family? Or is there something beyond all this that truly makes you you? Sometimes we feel lost in a role. Society, family, and friends have expectations of you, and often you shape yourself to fit these expectations. From a young age, you are expected to be a good student, follow rules, and become a person that society deems normal. Over time, these expectations become the building blocks of your identity. But somewhere deep inside, beyond all these things, there is a self. What happened to that self? Identity is often like clothing imposed upon us. As children, we borrow identities from our families, and as we grow, from society, school, and our surroundings. Over time, we begin to shed these layers in search of our true selves. But the real question is, if you remove all these identities one by one, what remains? If you strip away your job, your family, your social status, your past mistakes, your achievements, even your name, who would you be then? This is precisely where the existential crisis begins. When a person is born, they are without an identity. A baby has not yet acquired a sense of self. They cannot speak, express themselves, or even comprehend their own existence. But as time passes, they are given a name, included in a family, and raised within a society. Thus, the first layers of identity begin to form. If, as a child, you are told you are amazing, you feel valuable. But if you are constantly criticized, you may withdraw into yourself. Our identities are shaped by the reflections we see in the eyes of others. But there is a problem. The eyes of others are changeable and unreliable. They can love us one day and judge us the next. But what if all these judgments are just reflections? If we seek our identity in the eyes of others, when will we truly find ourselves? People often think they have found their identity. They acquire a profession, attain a certain status, and shape their lives accordingly. However, life is never fixed. One day, you might lose your job, lose loved ones, or grow old. Then who will you be? If you have tied your identity to external factors, the moment those factors disappear, you may find yourself lost in an abyss. At this point, you begin to question your true self. Some define their identity through the groups they belong to, through nationality, religion, or social circles. These groups provide a sense of belonging, which creates a sense of meaning. But what if one day that sense of belonging is lost? What if you no longer feel like a part of that group? Then the question, who am I, echoes even louder. Identity is something that changes and evolves over time. The person you are today is different from who you were 5 years ago. And 5 years from now, you will likely be someone else. But this change can be frightening. People want to feel as though they have a fixed identity. Yet the truth is that our identity is not static. Life constantly shapes and transforms us, and sometimes this transformation can be painful. But perhaps identity is not something to be found, but something to be created. Perhaps there is no single answer to the question, who am I? Because the answer continues to evolve. And now, look into the mirror again and ask yourself, do you truly know who you are? Or, like everyone else, are you on a never-ending journey of self-discovery and transformation? Belonging, the search for a place to fit in. When you ask someone who they are, their answer will often be rooted in a sense of belonging. I'm a teacher. I'm an artist. These statements give shape to identity, offering a place in the world, a sense of connection. But is a person merely a collection of titles and labels? Can identity be reduced to a profession, a nationality, or an affiliation? Or is there something deeper, something beyond these external definitions? Belonging is one of the fundamental pillars of human identity. It provides comfort, security, and meaning. The feeling of being part of a family, a community, or a culture gives life structure and direction. From childhood, we are shaped by the groups we grow up in. Our family instills values, our culture dictates norms, and our society offers a sense of collective purpose. These external identities become the lenses through which we see ourselves. They tell us who we are, how we should behave, and what our place in the world is. However, belonging is a double-edged sword. While it offers security, it can also impose limitations. The rules, expectations, and traditions of the groups we identify with can sometimes restrict our individuality. They tell us what is acceptable and what is not, shaping our choices and actions. In the pursuit of belonging, we often suppress parts of ourselves that do not fit into the predefined mold. The desire to be accepted can lead us to compromise our true selves, conforming to roles that may not align with who we really are. But what happens when that sense of belonging is taken away? What if one day the thing that defines you disappears? If you can no longer teach, if you are unable to create art, if the community you once belonged to no longer recognizes you, who are you then? This is where the crisis begins. When the external structures that gave you identity collapse, you are left staring into the void, searching for something solid to hold on to. Perhaps true identity is not solely about belonging, it is about discovering who you are beyond the groups you identify with. It is about understanding that while belonging provides a foundation, it should not define the entirety of your existence. You are more than a profession, more than a nationality, more than a role assigned to you by society. The real challenge is to carve out an identity that remains intact even when the labels are stripped away. So, ask yourself, if everything you associate with your identity were gone, your job, your nationality, your social circles, who would you be? Would you still recognize yourself, or would you feel lost? True self-discovery begins not when you find a place to fit in, but when you realize that you can exist and thrive even outside of the structures that once defined you. The fluidity of identity. We are not fixed, we are evolving. At times, people hold tightly to their identity. But identity is not a fixed concept. It changes, evolves, and never stays the same. Think back to the person you were 5 years ago. The things you thought, the values you believed in, maybe even your favorite foods, they've probably changed. 10 years ago, you would have described yourself very differently. And likely, 10 years from now, you will no longer be who you are today. Now, imagine the future. 10 years from now, you'll look back at the person you are today and realize you've shifted again, perhaps in ways you didn't even expect. This ongoing evolution of identity is much like a river's flow. We don't know where we'll end up, and we can't predict all the turns along the way, but what we do know is that we'll keep moving, changing, growing. This raises an interesting question. If we are constantly changing, is there really such a thing as a fixed identity? Or is identity merely a constantly shifting story? The beauty of this ever-evolving process is that it allows us to grow. Adapting to change, leaving the past behind, and stepping into the unknown takes courage. And although this change may sometimes surprise or even frighten us, it's through it that we gain deeper understanding and emerge stronger with each transformation. Instead of clinging to the idea of a fixed identity, let's embrace the truth that we are, in fact, constantly reshaping ourselves. With each experience, each lesson, we evolve. We're not static beings. We're dynamic, ever-changing, and ever-becoming. Our identity is like a work of art that's never finished. It's continuously being created, not by a single stroke, but through countless moments that shape us. So, rather than thinking of ourselves as fixed, let's recognize that we are constantly becoming someone new. The person you are today isn't the final version of you. It's just another chapter in a long, beautiful story. The best part is, we get to write the next chapter. And in doing so, we continue to discover who we really are. The influence of society on identity. Can we write our own story? From the moment we are born, society begins to shape us. We are told who we should be, how we should act, and what we should want. You must be successful. You must be strong. Dress this way. Think this way. These voices, sometimes from family, sometimes from culture, sometimes from the media, are loud, insistent, and often impossible to ignore. But what do you truly want? Beneath all these external expectations, who are you at your core? Are we really the sum of our own desires, or are we simply the product of everything society has taught us to be? This is where the true crisis of identity begins. People often spend their lives playing roles that have been prescribed to them by others' roles that might not even feel like their own. Maybe it's the role of the high achiever, the dependable friend, the perfect parent, or the strong, independent individual. But what happens when you are forced to abandon these roles? When your external identity is stripped away through loss, failure, or even personal growth, who are you left with? This is the unsettling question that many people face at some point in their lives. If society has defined so much of who we are, can we ever truly be free to define ourselves? And if we can, where do we begin? Perhaps the answer lies in realizing that true identity is not something imposed from the outside. It's not a set of expectations to live up to or roles to play. Instead, it is something we create from within, an ongoing, evolving story that we are writing ourselves. True identity is not static. It's not fixed. It's dynamic, shaped by our inner desires, beliefs, experiences, and choices. When we look inside ourselves, we find the raw materials of who we really are: our values, our passions, our dreams. And it is only when we embrace this internal compass that we can truly begin to write our own story, free from the constraints of external expectations. This doesn't mean ignoring society altogether. It means acknowledging its influence, but not allowing it to define us completely. We can take the pieces we need, discard the ones that no longer serve us, and choose to live authentically according to our true desires. In doing so, we reclaim ownership of our identity and start creating a version of ourselves that is uniquely ours. At the end of the day, the most profound and powerful thing we can do is to write our own story without fear, without doubt, and without the constant pull of society's expectations. Because only when we fully embrace our true selves can we finally discover who we are meant to be. Beyond I, the resolution of the identity crisis. True identity is more than names, titles, or social roles. It is not confined to a label that can be easily pinned on us. Perhaps, in fact, identity is not about clinging to something, but rather about letting go of those things we cling to. We often think of identity as something we must hold on to tightly, an unchanging core of who we are, something we must protect from the world's influence. But maybe the path to understanding who we really are lies not in grasping tightly to a fixed identity, but in flowing with the changes, in embracing the ebb and flow of life. Maybe it's about accepting that we are not just one thing, but many things. We can be happy at one moment, sad the next. We can be strong and confident, and in the next instant, vulnerable and uncertain. We can be joyful, and we can grieve. We don't need to fit into a mold, nor should we try to. We are not one-dimensional. We are multifaceted and complex. The journey of finding yourself might not be about discovering a static identity, but about being willing to let go of the identities we thought we had to hold on to. In the process, we might realize that the answer to the question, "Who are you?" isn't something rigid or permanent. Perhaps the true answer is simply, "I am the person I am in this very moment, and maybe that is enough." What if identity isn't something we create or achieve, but something we experience? We don't need to define ourselves by an unchangeable past or an uncertain future. Instead, we exist as we are right now. Who we are is fluid, evolving, and ever-changing. And in accepting that, we free ourselves from the pressure of needing to define ourselves in ways that others might understand. Maybe the resolution of the identity crisis isn't about finding the right answer. It's about being comfortable with the fact that the answer is always changing, just like us. In each passing moment, we are someone new, and in that, we are fully ourselves. And maybe, in the end, that's all we really need to be. Can you really find yourself? Some people view the process of finding oneself as a destination, a goal. They believe that one day they'll wake up and have a profound realization, a sudden moment of clarity when they'll exclaim, "This is who I am." But in reality, identity is not a fixed and changing entity. It evolves, it transforms, and it is never fully static. Philosophers have long grappled with this idea. Jean-Paul Sartre, for instance, argued that humans are not born with an inherent essence. Instead, we create ourselves through our choices and actions. According to Sartre, we are not born with a preordained identity. Who we are is something we construct over time. This implies that if you were born in a different place or raised by a different family, you could have turned out to be an entirely different person. So, which version of you is the real you? Is it the person you are today, shaped by your upbringing, culture, and experiences? Or is it some other version of you that could have emerged under different circumstances? And even more compelling is the question, what happens when life changes you? What happens when the things you thought defined you, your profession, your relationships, your beliefs suddenly fall away or shift dramatically? Who will you be then? If you lose a job you've had for years, or if a major life event changes your perspective on everything, what remains of your identity? The person you were before, the person you thought you were, may no longer feel like the person you are now. In fact, perhaps the real question is not, "Who am I?" but, "Who could I become?" Rather than focusing on finding a fixed version of ourselves, maybe the real challenge is embracing the idea that we are always in the process of becoming, constantly changing and reinventing ourselves in response to new experiences, relationships, and insights. The idea of finding yourself may be a misnomer, because in truth, there is no final destination, only a journey. We are always evolving, always shifting, and always capable of becoming someone new. Our identity is not about discovering a static answer, but about continuously exploring the infinite possibilities of who we can be. And maybe that's the most exciting part of being human, realizing that we're never really finished, and there's always a new version of ourselves waiting to be discovered. The reflection of others, our social masks. We all wear different faces depending on the context. At work, we might adopt a professional, focused demeanor. With friends, we can be carefree and spontaneous. With family, we may slip into a familiar, perhaps more vulnerable version of ourselves. But amidst all these shifting roles, which one is the real you? Carl Jung introduced the concept of the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate different environments. These masks are necessary to help us function within society, but the danger lies in mistaking them for our true identity. When we start to believe that the mask is the real self, we risk losing sight of who we truly are beneath the layers we create to fit in. Take, for instance, someone whose entire sense of self is tied to their career. If they've spent decades identifying as a doctor, a lawyer, or a CEO, retirement or a career change can feel like a loss of purpose. Without the title or the role, they may feel adrift, unsure of who they are without the mask of their profession. Similarly, someone who has built their entire identity around a relationship might experience a profound sense of loss when that relationship ends, feeling disconnected and uncertain of their place in the world. The truth is, our authentic self lies beneath the masks we wear, and yet many are afraid to confront it. The masks provide a sense of security, a way to protect ourselves from vulnerability or judgment. They make us feel as though we belong or are accepted, even if they aren't the truest version of who we are. What happens when we take off the mask? It can be both liberating and terrifying. To remove the persona means confronting the raw and filtered version of ourselves, unprotected, unformed, and perhaps uncertain. But in this process, we might also find a deeper, more authentic identity, one that isn't shaped by others' expectations or societal roles. Yet, many shy away from this discovery, preferring the comfort of their familiar masks rather than risking the vulnerability of self-exploration. The challenge lies in balancing the personas we wear with the recognition that these roles are not who we truly are. The real self exists beyond these reflections, and the journey of self-discovery often requires peeling back the layers we've carefully constructed to survive in the world. The existential void, identity crisis, and the sense of meaninglessness. There are moments in life when an identity crisis plunges a person into a deep sense of emptiness. Questions like, who am I? What am I doing? And what is the meaning of my life? Echo in the mind, causing a profound sense of confusion and disorientation. This brings us to a central idea discussed by existential philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus. Life has no inherent or objective meaning. At first glance, this might sound unsettling, even terrifying, but it is also incredibly freeing. If life has no predetermined meaning, then we have the freedom to create our own purpose. This is the essence of existentialism, embracing the freedom to define our existence on our own terms, rather than relying on external sources to do so. One of Camus's most famous works, The Myth of Sisyphus, paints a vivid picture of this philosophy. In the story, Sisyphus, condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a mountain for eternity, watches in despair as it inevitably rolls back down every time he reaches the top. The repetition is endless, and yet it mirrors many of our own lives. We often find ourselves in routines, performing the same tasks, facing similar struggles, without fully understanding the why behind it all. Camus offers a striking perspective. Sisyphus does not have to be miserable. Although he is stuck with a task he cannot change, he still has the power to find meaning in it. He may never escape the cycle, but he can transform his experience of it by finding purpose in his struggle. In the same way, identity is not about the roles and labels we are given, but about how we choose to engage with them. Even if we can't change our circumstances, we can always choose how we respond to them and what meaning we derive from them. When life feels repetitive or meaningless, it's easy to fall into despair. But like Sisyphus, we have the potential to redefine our relationship with life's challenges. The key is to embrace our freedom to create meaning even in the smallest, most mundane tasks. Just as Camus suggests that Sisyphus finds joy in the struggle, so too can we find fulfillment in the roles we play, not because they are grand or important, but because we choose to find purpose in them. Ultimately, an identity crisis, while unsettling, offers a unique opportunity, the chance to step back, question everything, and then actively choose the meaning we wish to create. The sense of emptiness we feel can be transformed into a canvas on which we paint our own meaning, shaping our identity not by the roles imposed on us, but by the meaning we decide to live out. How to avoid getting lost in the search for identity, the path to freedom. If you're experiencing an identity crisis right now, it's important to remember that this isn't inherently a bad thing. In fact, it's an opportunity for growth. Often, people who don't question their identity are merely playing roles that others have assigned to them. But by questioning, you are already one step closer to writing your own story, and that's something powerful. To break free from this crisis, the first thing to do is to stop looking through the eyes of others. So much of how we define ourselves comes from how others perceive us, whether it's our family, friends, or society as a whole. But this external validation should not be the basis of your identity. The real question is, if no one was judging you, who would you choose to be? Let go of the pressure to fit into the molds others expect, and give yourself the space to imagine who you might be without those external voices. Another important step is to stop defining yourself by your past. While your history certainly shapes you, it doesn't fully define who you are now. You are not just the sum of your past actions or mistakes. The person you were 5 years ago isn't the person you have to be today. Identity isn't about being stuck in a narrative. It's about choosing who you want to be in this moment. Every moment is an opportunity to start anew and embrace the person you're becoming without being shackled by past expectations. It's also crucial to embrace change. Your identity is not static, it's a fluid, evolving process. You are constantly growing, learning, and adapting to new experiences. Trying to cling to one fixed version of yourself can be limiting. Instead, open yourself to the possibility that who you are today doesn't have to be who you will be tomorrow. Allow yourself to evolve and shift as life does. And perhaps in the end, there's no definitive answer to the question, who am I? Maybe the most honest response is simply, I am who I am in this moment, and perhaps that is enough. Identity is not a rigid, unchanging concept. It's a journey, an ongoing story, and the beauty of it is that you are the one holding the pen. There's freedom in not needing to define yourself forever, but simply allowing yourself to be fully who you are right now. What happens after death? Confronting the finite nature of life. The question of what happens after death has been a profound and persistent mystery that has haunted humanity for centuries. It is a question that stirs deep reflection, ignites fears, and challenges our understanding of existence. Though it remains beyond the reach of definitive knowledge, the idea of life's end raises countless existential inquiries, sparking diverse beliefs and philosophical debates about what follows. Throughout history, people have turned to religion, spirituality, and philosophy to answer this question. Different cultures offer varied perspectives. Some envision an afterlife in paradise or hell. Others propose reincarnation or the merging of consciousness with the universe, while some embrace the idea of nothingness, where existence ceases entirely. These beliefs, although differing, all point to a common desire to understand the unknown and alleviate the fear of the inevitable end. Yet, despite the abundance of theories and beliefs, the one certainty we all share is the finite nature of life. Our time here is limited, and the mystery of death forces us to confront the impermanence of our existence. This awareness often brings discomfort, for it challenges our desire for permanence and control. We live in a world where we want meaning, where we seek purpose, but death reminds us that, regardless of how we shape our lives, it all ultimately ends. However, it is this very confrontation with mortality that can lead to a deeper appreciation of life. The recognition of our limited time encourages us to live more fully, to cherish the fleeting moments we have, and to find meaning in the present, rather than in some distant afterlife. The fear of death, paradoxically, can inspire us to engage more passionately with life. Ultimately, the question of what happens after death may remain unanswered. But in this uncertainty, we are invited to embrace the mystery, to seek understanding in our own way, and to live with an awareness that what matters most is not what happens after death, but how we choose to live in the time we have. The fear of death and the unknown. At the core of humanity's fear of death is a deep unease about the unknown and unknown that is both inevitable and beyond our control. We can measure time, explore the mysteries of space, and understand the mechanisms of life, but death remains an enigma, untouched by reason or certainty. It's the only universal truth we all face, yet it holds an almost mythical quality, resisting any attempt to fully grasp or prepare for it. For many, the fear of death is not simply the fear of ceasing to exist, but of the profound uncertainty about what, if anything, comes after. Death is not just a personal loss of existence. It's an existential boundary, one that challenges our sense of continuity and control. It forces us to confront the limits of our perception and our understanding of the universe. Even with all of our technological advancements, there is still no definitive answer about what happens when life ends, leaving us in a perpetual state of wonder and often fear. Some view death as a complete and final end. When the lights go out, there is nothing left. This outlook can bring a sense of nihilism, where everything feels transient and, in the grand scheme, insignificant. On the other hand, others hold on to the belief in something beyond the grave and afterlife, reincarnation, or some form of spiritual continuation. The hope for transcendence offers comfort, but it also raises questions about the nature of existence itself. Is life simply a brief journey toward something greater, or is it just a series of meaningless events that stop abruptly? The fear of death, in its most existential form, lies not just in the act of dying, but in the psychological void it creates in the minds of individuals. It is a fear of non-being, the loss of the self, and the lack of any closure on what we really are beyond this brief time on earth. We struggle to imagine the nothingness that comes after life because, as conscious beings, our understanding is based on the experience of continuous existence. The very thought of an end challenges everything we know about ourselves. This fear isn't only about the individual's death. It's also collective, a shared anxiety that permeates societies and cultures. The unknown beckons us in ways that religion, philosophy, and science often try to define, but still we return to the same question: what happens after we die? And perhaps the most unsettling part of this fear is that the answer remains elusive, no matter how much we seek to understand it. The ambiguity itself becomes the heart of the anxiety. But in that uncertainty, there is also an invitation. Death, and the mystery surrounding it, can push us toward a deeper exploration of life's meaning. Instead of being paralyzed by fear, we can choose to embrace the unknown not as a source of terror, but as a motivation to live more fully, to appreciate the present moment, and to cherish the fragile nature of our existence. Understanding death as the great unknown can paradoxically teach us how to live more consciously and deeply, urging us to find meaning in every breath, every experience, and every relationship we form, because, in the end, it is not the certainty of the afterlife that shapes our lives, but the intensity with which we live in the present. Diverse beliefs about the afterlife. Humanity's understanding of what happens after death has always been shaped by the beliefs, philosophies, and spiritual systems of different cultures. From visions of eternal paradise to the notion of reincarnation, people across the world have constructed their own interpretations of the afterlife, each offering a unique perspective on the mystery that surrounds the end of life. In Christianity, the afterlife is often viewed as a duality, either a reward in heaven or a punishment in hell. This belief is based on one's actions during their life, as well as their faith in Jesus Christ. For many Christians, the afterlife is the ultimate culmination of their moral journey on earth, where the soul is either elevated to eternal bliss or condemned to suffering, depending on how they lived. Islam, too, shares a similar vision of judgment in the afterlife. In this belief system, the soul is judged based on a person's deeds, their devotion to God Allah, and their adherence to Islamic principles. Those who have lived righteous lives are granted eternal paradise, while those who have strayed from the path of righteousness face punishment in hell. This divine judgment highlights the importance of moral conduct and spiritual devotion in life. On the other hand, religions such as Hinduism and Buddhism offer views of the afterlife that emphasize the cyclical nature of life. Both believe in reincarnation, the idea that death is not the end but a transition into another life. In these traditions, the soul or consciousness continues its journey, reborn into a new form, with the specific conditions of that life shaped by the karmic deeds of previous lives. This cycle of life, death, and rebirth continues until spiritual liberation moksha, or nirvana, is attained, ending the cycle and achieving ultimate peace. For those who do not follow a religious framework, secular or atheistic views present death as the final cessation of consciousness. From this perspective, there is no afterlife, and life simply ends when biological processes cease. This belief can bring both a sense of finality and, for some, a release from the anxieties of what lies beyond. Without the fear of judgment or punishment, secular thinkers often focus on making the most of the present life, seeing death as a natural part of the human experience that should not be feared but accepted. These diverse beliefs about the afterlife reflect the multitude of ways that human beings cope with the existential question of what happens after death. Some see death as a gateway to an eternal realm of peace or suffering, while others believe in a continuous cycle of rebirth, and still others view it as the ultimate end of individual existence. Despite these differences, all these beliefs reveal a shared desire to find meaning in the face of mortality, to make sense of our finite lives, and to seek comfort in the unknown. What unites these perspectives, perhaps, is the human capacity for wonder and speculation. Even as we confront the certainty of death, our imaginations race toward the possibility of something more, a continuation, a transformation, or a final release. Whether one believes in an afterlife or not, the mystery of what lies beyond remains a central part of the human condition, challenging us to explore, question, and ultimately come to terms with our own mortality. The search for meaning in life. In the face of the inevitability of death, one of the most profound human responses is the search for meaning in life. This quest often leads individuals to explore different facets of existence, from relationships and personal connections to creative endeavors and philosophical inquiries. At the heart of this search is a desire to understand one's purpose in the grand scheme of existence and to create a sense of significance that transcends the finite nature of life. Philosophers have long grappled with questions about the meaning of life, especially in relation to death. Existential thinkers such as Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus have examined the idea of death as freedom according to this perspective. The awareness of our mortality can serve as a catalyst for personal freedom. Knowing that life is finite allows us to break free from societal expectations and external definitions of who we should be, encouraging us to construct our own meaning and values. Sartre, in particular, argued that life has no inherent purpose until we choose to define it for ourselves. In facing the certainty of death, we are liberated to live authentically, creating meaning from within. Similarly, Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy of becoming who you are presents a radical way to confront life's absurdity. Nietzsche suggested that, rather than accepting predetermined values and structures, we must challenge ourselves to create our own path to be individuals who shape their own destiny. For Nietzsche, the recognition of life's inherent chaos and unpredictability becomes the key to finding personal freedom. Through embracing the idea of self-overcoming and constant transformation, we can cultivate meaning that is uniquely ours. Beyond philosophy, creative expression also plays a crucial role in humanity's search for meaning. Writers, musicians, and artists often channel their deepest emotions and existential struggles into their work, creating something that outlasts their physical bodies. By pouring their essence into their art, they create a lasting legacy that serves as a form of defiance against the finality of death. In this sense, the act of creation becomes an antidote to mortality, offering the artist a way to continue living in the memories of others, or even in the ongoing influence of their work. The pursuit of creative immortality reflects the human desire to leave something of value behind, to contribute to a collective narrative that transcends individual lives. Furthermore, the search for meaning is not limited to intellectual or artistic pursuits. Relationships, love, friendship, and human connection also offer a form of meaning. In the context of death, these bonds become even more significant as they represent continuity and the shared experience of being alive. In many ways, the connections we make with others provide us with a sense of purpose that transcends our individual existence. By loving and being loved, by helping others and sharing our lives, we create meaning through our presence in the lives of those around us. The search for meaning in life, then, is both an individual and collective pursuit. While death is an inevitable part of the human condition, our response to it can be transformative. We can face mortality with a sense of liberation, allowing it to guide us toward greater authenticity and self-expression. We can create meaning through our relationships, our actions, and our contributions to the world. Ultimately, while death may mark the end of an individual life, the search for meaning can ensure that our legacy, in one form or another, endures. Consciousness and the Afterlife, a scientific and philosophical inquiry. The relationship between consciousness and death is one of the most profound and perplexing questions humanity has faced for centuries. What happens to our consciousness after death? Is it truly extinguished, or does it continue in some form? These questions have sparked debates across religious, philosophical, and scientific domains, each offering a distinct interpretation of what may or may not occur once life comes to an end. In many religious traditions, the idea of an afterlife involves the continuation of consciousness beyond the physical body. Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism, for example, suggest that the soul or consciousness persists after death, either entering an eternal paradise, reincarnating into a new life, or undergoing some form of spiritual transformation. These beliefs imply that consciousness is not merely a product of the brain's functions, but rather a separate, indestructible essence that transcends the physical realm. In contrast, the scientific community generally holds that consciousness is closely tied to the brain and its biological processes. From this perspective, once the body ceases to function and the brain shuts down, consciousness ceases as well. This view is rooted in the materialist understanding of the mind, which posits that our thoughts, emotions, and awareness are the results of biochemical reactions in the brain. According to this theory, when the body dies, so too does consciousness, leaving no room for survival after death. However, the idea that consciousness is merely a byproduct of biological processes does not fully address all aspects of human experience, leading many philosophers and scientists to question the nature of consciousness itself. Some argue that consciousness may be more than just a material phenomenon, potentially existing independently of the body. Could it be possible that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of the universe, akin to space or time, that continues even after the death of the body? This idea, sometimes referred to as panpsychism or dualism, suggests that consciousness may transcend physical death, opening the door to possibilities such as an afterlife or the continuation of the self beyond the biological constraints of the human body. One area of investigation that has brought attention to this issue is the study of near-death experiences in these. Many people who have had NDEs report experiencing phenomena such as traveling through a tunnel of light, feeling a sense of peace or unity, or even encountering deceased loved ones. These reports, though subjective and varied, have raised questions about whether consciousness can persist after death, or whether these experiences might be the result of chemical reactions in the brain during the process of dying. Some researchers argue that NDEs are simply the product of brain activity during the dying process, perhaps a result of oxygen deprivation, neural responses to trauma, or the release of certain chemicals like DMT. From this perspective, the vivid experiences reported by individuals undergoing NDEs are nothing more than the brain's attempt to make sense of a chaotic and life-threatening situation. Others, however, believe that NDEs provide compelling evidence that consciousness is not entirely dependent on the physical brain. These proponents suggest that the consistency of certain elements in NDEs, such as the feeling of peace, the sense of detachment from the body, or the vision of a light, points to the possibility that consciousness may exist beyond the material realm. Some even speculate that these experiences could be glimpses of the afterlife, offering a tantalizing hint at what lies beyond death. Despite the ongoing debate, the relationship between consciousness and the afterlife remains elusive. Whether consciousness is a purely biological phenomenon or something more transcendent, science and philosophy continue to explore this profound question. What is clear is that the nature of consciousness itself is still one of the great mysteries of existence, and our understanding of what happens after death, if anything, may ultimately depend on how we define consciousness in the first place. As we continue to probe the depths of the mind, the intersection of consciousness and death offers both scientific intrigue and philosophical wonder, forcing us to confront the boundaries of human knowledge and consider the possibility that there is more to existence than meets the eye. Whether we find evidence of life after death or not, the question itself underscores the complexity and mystery of what it means to be conscious and to exist at all. Facing mortality, the role of acceptance and peace. Throughout history, many individuals have found ways to confront the inevitable reality of death with grace, peace, and acceptance. These individuals often speak of a profound sense of clarity that comes when they stop resisting the truth of their mortality. Instead of seeing death as an enemy or an event to fear, they choose to embrace it, recognizing it as an integral part of the human experience. This acceptance doesn't equate to resignation or surrender, but rather serves as a catalyst for living with greater intentionality, peace, and purpose. The Stoic philosophers, most notably Marcus Aurelius, taught that one should not shy away from contemplating death, but rather accept it as a natural and inescapable aspect of life. In his meditations, Aurelius reminds himself daily that death is not something to fear, for it is simply a transition, something that happens to everyone and is a part of the grand order of the universe. For Stoics, the awareness of death creates space for a focused and virtuous life. It compels individuals to live with integrity, knowing that time is precious and finite. By accepting the inevitability of death, they believe we are freed to live with greater purpose, dedicating ourselves to virtue, kindness, and wisdom. The Stoic view encourages us to focus on what we can control: our thoughts, actions, and reactions, while letting go of the anxiety that comes with trying to control the uncontrollable. Similarly, Zen Buddhism offers a profound approach to facing death that emphasizes acceptance and presence. Zen practitioners are taught to see death not as an event to be feared, but as a natural part of the impermanence of life. The Zen philosophy emphasizes the transient nature of all things. Nothing lasts forever, including our own lives. By embracing this impermanence, practitioners learn to let go of attachments to both life and death. This acceptance helps cultivate peace and tranquility in the face of mortality, enabling individuals to live fully in the present moment without clinging to the past or worrying about the future. Zen teachings encourage mindfulness, and the act of acknowledging the temporary nature of existence fosters a deep, quiet peace that can be accessed at any time. The acceptance of death also plays a significant role in finding meaning and balance in life. In both Stoicism and Zen Buddhism, the focus is not on avoiding or denying the reality of death, but on fully embracing it as an essential part of living well. The idea is that by confronting our mortality head-on, we can strip away the distractions, fears, and illusions that often cloud our judgments and actions. This clarity allows us to live with a deeper sense of authenticity and connectedness, making choices that reflect our true values and desires, rather than being motivated by fear or external pressures. In practical terms, accepting death may also encourage a shift in perspective about what truly matters. When we realize that our time is limited, we may start prioritizing relationships, personal growth, and experiences over material possessions or superficial achievements. This awareness fosters a profound sense of gratitude for the present moment, urging us to appreciate the fleeting nature of life and to savor each experience, whether big or small. Ultimately, the role of acceptance in facing mortality is about finding peace with the unknown and recognizing the beauty in impermanence. By accepting that death is as much a part of life as birth, we free ourselves from the fear that so often holds us back. Instead, we are empowered to live more fully, with greater awareness, presence, and clarity. Death, then, is not the end, but rather a natural and integral part of the cycle that makes life all the more precious. Technological horizons, the future of life and death. In the 21st century, technology is beginning to redefine some of humanity's oldest and most profound concepts, life and death. As advancements in artificial intelligence (AI), neuroscience, and digital technology continue to evolve, new possibilities are emerging that challenge traditional beliefs about existence and mortality. One of the most intriguing ideas in this area is digital immortality, the notion that a person's consciousness, memories, and personality might be preserved in digital form after their physical death. These concepts, which once seemed like science fiction, are beginning to enter mainstream discussions about the future of human life and death. Digital immortality suggests that through technologies like brain-computer interfaces, neural mapping, and advanced AI, it may be possible to upload human consciousness into machines or virtual realities. This would mean that, in theory, one's mind could live on in some form, even after the body has perished. The idea draws upon the notion that consciousness might be a computational process, a series of complex neural interactions that could potentially be replicated and transferred to a digital or artificial environment. Such a transfer could allow individuals to continue existing, not in a physical body, but within a computer or virtual world, with their memories and experiences preserved indefinitely. This notion of posthumous existence raises numerous questions about the nature of life and what it means to be alive. If consciousness can exist within a machine or a virtual reality, does this mean a person is still truly alive, or are they simply a simulation of the original human? Does retaining one's memories, thoughts, and personality traits mean retaining one's identity, or is something vital lost in the process of digitization? Furthermore, if a person's mind can be uploaded, who controls it? What rights do these digital minds have? Would they be able to evolve and change as human beings do, or would they be stuck in a fixed, unchanging state? While the idea of uploading consciousness to create a form of digital immortality is still speculative, there are already companies and research projects focused on preserving memories and identities after death. For instance, digital legacies are already being created through social media profiles, photos, videos, and personal writings. Some services allow people to pre-record messages for loved ones, creating a living presence even after they are gone. While this is a far cry from full digital consciousness, it reflects a growing desire to extend one's presence beyond physical death and maintain a connection with the world after the end of life. However, these advancements also prompt profound ethical, philosophical, and theological questions. Many religions and philosophical systems hold that human consciousness is intimately tied to the physical body and that death marks the end of one's existence in any form. These traditions may view digital immortality as a threat to the natural order or as a fundamentally misguided attempt to defy the inherent limits of human life. If consciousness can be transferred into a machine or preserved digitally, does this undermine the value of life and death as natural processes? What does it mean for the soul or the spirit concepts central to many belief systems if the mind can live on in artificial, non-biological forms? Moreover, the potential for digital immortality raises concerns about inequality and access. Who gets to live on in digital form? Would only the wealthy, powerful, or technologically savvy have access to such technologies, creating a new kind of social and existential divide? Additionally, if AI systems can replicate and simulate human consciousness, what happens to human creativity, relationships, and individuality? Will we lose the essence of what it means to be human if our minds are confined to algorithms and data storage? While these questions remain unanswered, it's clear that technology is pushing us into new territory regarding the future of life and death. As the boundary between biological existence and digital simulation continues to blur, humanity faces new opportunities, but also new dilemmas. Will we accept the challenge of redefining life and death, or will we resist, clinging to the familiar understanding of mortality? The horizon of technological innovation offers exciting possibilities, but it also demands that we reflect deeply on the implications for who we are, what we value, and how we want to live and die in the future. Death as liberation, reinterpreting the end. For many, the concept of death is associated with loss, fear, or mourning the final, inescapable end of a journey. However, in certain philosophical and spiritual traditions, death is viewed not as a sorrowful conclusion, but as a liberation. In particular, some schools of Eastern philosophy, such as Hinduism and Buddhism, interpret death as a freeing release from the cycle of life, often referred to as samsara, the continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. In these traditions, death is not seen as an absolute end, but as an opportunity for the soul or consciousness to transcend its earthly limitations and merge with the divine or universal consciousness. In Hinduism, this idea is particularly prevalent in the teachings of moksha, the liberation of the soul from the cycles of reincarnation. The soul, after countless lives, is freed from its material existence and reunites with the ultimate reality, known as Brahman. This is seen not as a tragic or fearful event, but rather as the soul's ultimate purpose and fulfillment, returning to the source from which it originated. Similarly, in Buddhism, the concept of nirvana reflects a similar liberation. Buddhists believe that death represents the cessation of dukkha, the suffering inherent in life, due to attachment, desire, and ignorance. Through spiritual practice, the individual can break free from the cycle of reincarnation and attain nirvana, which is a state of perfect peace and freedom from all suffering. In this view, death is not an end to be feared, but a peaceful transition into a state of enlightenment and unity with the cosmos. This philosophical lens allows for a profound shift in how one views death. Rather than seeing it as the extinguishing of life or the termination of identity, it can be seen as a liberation from the limitations of the physical world. In these traditions, life is viewed as a transient journey, and death is the final step in returning to a state of purity and wholeness. Death is the ultimate freedom from the constraints of the body, the ego, and the endless cycles of reincarnation. It is seen as a return to oneness with the universe, where individual consciousness merges with the infinite. For those who have embraced this view, death may no longer be feared, but rather accepted as a natural and inevitable part of existence. Instead of dreading the unknown, they see death as a peaceful transition, an opportunity to leave behind suffering and reunite with a universal truth. In this sense, death becomes less about the end of an individual life and more about the continuation of a greater cosmic flow. Life, in this view, is a journey of learning, growing, and eventually shedding the temporary constraints of the physical realm to experience a higher state of being. This reimagining of death as liberation can offer comfort and solace, particularly in times of loss. Instead of focusing on the finality of death, one can focus on the transcendence it offers. The idea that death is a return to wholeness or unity with the divine can help individuals reconcile with the impermanence of life. It provides a way to frame death as not a tragedy, but a peaceful and necessary transition in the grand cycle of existence. Moreover, this understanding encourages living in alignment with deeper truths and higher values, as the ultimate goal is to transcend the ego and worldly attachments. By recognizing death as a return to the universal, individuals may be more inclined to live in harmony with others, the environment, and the deeper aspects of existence. This awareness fosters compassion, mindfulness, and a sense of purpose in life, knowing that death, in its liberation, is part of the eternal flow of the universe. In sum, reinterpreting death as a form of liberation offers a liberating perspective on life itself. It invites individuals to approach both life and death with openness, understanding, and acceptance, viewing death as an essential step in the journey of the soul. For those who embrace this perspective, death is not something to resist, but something to embrace with peace, knowing that it leads to a profound reunification with the cosmos, the divine, or the ultimate reality. The legacy of human endeavor, what we leave behind. In the face of death, one of the most profound ways in which humans seek meaning and comfort is through the legacy they leave behind. The question of what survives us, what carries on after we are gone, can be both a source of motivation and a method of confronting our own mortality. The desire for immortality is not necessarily rooted in the pursuit of eternal life, but rather in the drive to ensure that one's existence has mattered, that one's actions have had a lasting impact on the world. For many, the most personal form of legacy is found in the relationships they build and the family they create. Raising children or nurturing close connections with friends and loved ones offers a sense of continuity, a way of passing on knowledge, values, and experiences that transcend individual lives. These bonds form the fabric of a legacy that continues to echo through generations. In this context, the idea of immortality is not about living forever in a physical sense, but about having a lasting influence on those who remain, shaping their lives, decisions, and futures. In addition to personal legacies, people also create enduring marks on society through their work, ideas, and creative pursuits. Throughout history, some of the greatest achievements, whether in art, science, literature, or social change, have been driven by the desire to leave something behind that outlives the individual. From the timeless works of Shakespeare to the groundbreaking discoveries of Einstein, human achievements often carry the fingerprints of those who sought to push the boundaries of knowledge and understanding, to solve problems, and to inspire future generations. For example, artists and creators often see their works as a form of immortality. A painting, a song, a novel, each piece of creative expression serves as a record of the artist's vision, emotions, and ideas. While the artist may pass away, their work can continue to inspire, challenge, and provoke thought long after their death. Similarly, scientists and innovators leave behind discoveries, inventions, and theories that continue to shape and transform the world, creating a ripple effect that endures through time. The desire to leave a legacy also plays a significant role in societal and cultural progress. Entire civilizations have been motivated by the aspiration to create something greater than themselves. The ancient Egyptians built monumental pyramids and temples as testaments to their gods and rulers, while the Greeks and Romans left a rich intellectual and architectural legacy that still influences Western civilization today. In more recent times, movements for social change, whether in the form of civil rights, environmental protection, or gender equality, are driven by the hope that future generations will benefit from the progress made by those who came before them. This desire for a lasting legacy speaks to a deep-seated human instinct to resist the finality of death. By creating something that persists beyond one's physical presence, individuals hope to leave a mark on the world that proves their life was significant. Whether through family, art, scientific progress, or social change, humans seek to transcend the limits of their mortal existence by leaving something that will continue to affect others. Yet, the notion of legacy is not without complexity. For some, the quest to leave a legacy may become an obsession, driven by the fear of being forgotten or irrelevant. This can lead to a preoccupation with achievement, success, or recognition that may obscure the more profound, simple joys of life. In this sense, the desire for legacy must be balanced with the understanding that not everything we do will necessarily endure in a tangible form. Some legacies are quieter, found in the kindnesses we offer, the ways we help others, or the way we live our lives with integrity and love. Not all legacies are immortalized in books or statues, but they can have profound effects on the people around us, who may carry those lessons and memories with them long after we're gone. In the end, the legacy we leave behind is not just about what we accomplish, but how we live. It's about the values we impart, the love we share, and the change we inspire in others. Whether grand or humble, a legacy is a reflection of the life we have lived, the mark we have left on the world, and the imprint we leave on the hearts and minds of those we encounter. In this way, death is not the final word. The legacy we create offers a way to continue contributing to the world, even in our absence. The pursuit of leaving something lasting can bring meaning to life, and in confronting death, we might find that it's not about how long we live, but how deeply we live and what we leave behind. Nihilism, confronting the void. What if everything you ever believed in, every moral code, every societal norm, every purpose you thought life had was nothing more than a fragile illusion? What if, beneath all human aspirations and grand narratives, there was nothing but an indifferent void? This is the unsettling, yet deeply provocative realm of nihilism. It is not just a philosophy, but a confrontation with the very nature of existence, a realization that meaning, value, and truth are not inherent qualities of the universe, but mere human constructs designed to comfort us against the abyss. At its heart, nihilism argues that life has no ultimate meaning, no divine purpose, no predetermined goal. The universe does not care about us. It does not reward virtue or punish vice. It simply exists cold, vast, and indifferent. For some, this revelation is terrifying. If nothing truly matters, then why should we strive? Why should we love, create, or dream? If death swallows us completely, leaving no trace of our existence, what is the point of anything? These questions have haunted the minds of philosophers, poets, and thinkers for centuries, leading some to despair and others to liberation. The fear of meaninglessness can feel like a crushing weight, a sense of futility that seeps into everything we do. Without an overarching purpose, life may seem absurd, like a cosmic joke with no punchline. But what if, instead of despairing, we embrace this absurdity? What if, in the absence of predetermined meaning, we found the ultimate freedom. Without a divine plan dictating our fate, without moral absolutes imposed from above, we become the architects of our own existence. This is where nihilism becomes more than just a rejection. It becomes a challenge. Thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche saw nihilism as both a threat and an opportunity. He warned of the dangers of falling into a state of passive resignation, where people, unable to cope with the loss of meaning, turn to escapism or blind faith. But he also envisioned a path forward, the creation of one's own values, a life lived not according to imposed doctrines, but through personal strength, creativity, and self-overcoming. If God is dead, as Nietzsche proclaimed, then it is up to us to fill the void. The arts, literature, and philosophy have long grappled with nihilism, painting vivid portraits of its implications. In the novels of Albert Camus and Franz Kafka, we see characters trapped in meaningless worlds, struggling to find purpose where none exists. In modern cinema, nihilistic themes appear in films like Fight Club and No Country for Old Men, where traditional notions of morality and order are stripped away, revealing a world governed by chaos and indifference. Even in music, from the raw aggression of punk rock to the existential reflections of grunge, we hear echoes of nihilism, the rebellion against artificial meaning, the defiance in the face of an uncaring universe. But nihilism is not just a philosophical puzzle or an intellectual exercise. It is a deeply personal confrontation. Every individual must, at some point, reckon with the question, does my life matter? Some will find comfort in faith, others in the pursuit of legacy, love, or creation. And some will stare into the abyss and see nothing. But even in that nothingness, there is a choice to succumb to despair or to embrace the raw, unfiltered reality of existence, to laugh in the face of absurdity. To live not because life has meaning, but because we have the power to create it. In the end, nihilism does not give answers. It strips them away. It does not offer comfort. It demands confrontation. It forces us to see the world as it truly is, without illusion, without pretense. And in that stark, brutal honesty, it presents a terrifying yet exhilarating possibility. If nothing matters, then we are free. If life has no inherent purpose, then every moment is an open canvas. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is meaning enough. Absurdism, the search for meaning and its paradox. Imagine standing at the edge of an infinite abyss, calling out for meaning, only to be met with silence. This is the heart of absurdism, a philosophy that confronts the contradiction between humanity's relentless search for purpose and the universe's indifference to that search. We are creatures wired to seek meaning in everything, yet we exist in a world that offers no inherent answers. This paradox, according to thinkers like Albert Camus, is what makes life absurd. But rather than surrendering to despair, Camus argues that recognizing and embracing this absurdity is the ultimate act of freedom. Absurdism does not claim that life is meaningless in a nihilistic sense. Instead, it acknowledges that meaning exists only because we create it, but this meaning is fragile, subjective, and ultimately incapable of answering the larger existential questions we ask. Religion, philosophy, and ideology all attempt to impose structure on an indifferent universe, but none can provide an objective, universal truth. The absurd arises in this tension. We demand meaning, but the universe remains silent. Camus illustrates this struggle through the myth of Sisyphus, the Greek figure condemned to roll a boulder up a mountain for eternity, only for it to roll back down each time he nears the top. On the surface, Sisyphus's fate seems like the ultimate symbol of futility, an endless cycle of struggle without reward. But Camus challenges us to view Sisyphus not as a figure of despair, but as a symbol of defiance. He argues that once Sisyphus accepts his fate, he is free. He is no longer a prisoner of false hope or illusions of meaning. He is fully aware of the absurdity of his condition and embraces it. One must imagine Sisyphus happy, Camus writes. In doing so, he transforms his suffering into a rebellion against the absurd. This philosophy forces a radical shift in perspective. If the universe does not provide meaning, we are left with two choices. We can fall into existential despair, or we can embrace life for what it is, an unpredictable, chaotic, and fleeting experience that holds value simply because we choose to experience it. In accepting the absurd, we no longer seek meaning as an external truth, but as something we create moment by moment. Absurdism appears everywhere in literature, art, and film. The works of Samuel Beckett, such as Waiting for Godot, portray characters trapped in an endless cycle of waiting for something that will never come. In film, absurdist themes emerge in movies like The Truman Show, where the protagonist realizes that his entire life has been a scripted illusion, and yet, rather than succumb to despair, he chooses freedom despite its uncertainty. Even in modern culture, from surrealist art to existential comedy, we see echoes of absurdism, the idea that humor, rebellion, and joy can be found in the very meaninglessness of it all. But absurdism is not simply about acceptance. It is about living with full awareness of life's contradictions and choosing to embrace them. It is about laughing in the face of uncertainty, finding beauty in the ephemeral, and reveling in the chaos of existence. The absurd hero does not seek escape through faith, nihilism, or absolute truth, but instead confronts life as it is without illusions, without false promises. In this defiance, in this conscious act of embracing the absurd, there is an exhilarating freedom. And so, the question remains, if life has no inherent meaning, will you lament its absurdity, or will you, like Sisyphus, learn to love the climb? Existentialism, creating one's own meaning. What if you were born without a predefined purpose, no grand cosmic plan, no inherent destiny, no external force dictating who you should become? What if, instead, you are entirely responsible for creating your own meaning, for shaping your own essence through the choices you make? This is the foundation of existentialism, a philosophy that does not deny life's challenges or uncertainties, but insists that the power to define meaning lies within the individual. Existentialist thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, and Albert Camus reject the idea that humans are born with an essential nature or purpose. Unlike a tool, which is designed for a specific function, humans enter the world as blank slates without a given essence. Sartre famously declares, existence precedes essence. In other words, we first exist, and only later do we define ourselves through our actions. We are not pre-written stories. We are the authors, free to shape our own narratives. But with this freedom comes a heavy burden, one that existentialists call radical responsibility. If there is no predetermined meaning, then we alone are accountable for the lives we lead. We cannot blame fate, society, or divine will for who we become. Every decision, every action, every path we take is our own. For some, this is an exhilarating form of liberation, the realization that we are the masters of our own fate. For others, it is a source of anxiety, an overwhelming sense of responsibility that Sartre refers to as anguish. This existential freedom also raises difficult questions. If there is no external source of meaning, then how do we determine what matters? If morality, purpose, and identity are not dictated by an outside force, do they become meaningless? Existentialism does not offer easy answers, but it does offer a challenge to live authentically, to act not based on social pressures, inherited beliefs, or external expectations, but based on what truly resonates with one's own being. Sartre calls the opposite of this bad faith, living dishonestly, conforming to roles and expectations out of fear rather than genuine conviction. The existentialist perspective has had a profound influence on literature, film, and art. In Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, we meet a protagonist who wrestles with his own contradictions, refusing to be defined by societal norms. Franz Kafka's works depict individuals lost in absurd bureaucracies, struggling to assert their freedom in an indifferent world. In cinema, existentialist themes emerge in films like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which explores identity and self-determination, and The Matrix, which questions reality and free will. Even modern storytelling, whether in video games, music, or poetry, often reflects the existential struggle. Who am I? What do I choose to become? At its core, existentialism is not about surrendering to despair, but about embracing the unknown. It is about rejecting passivity, refusing to let life simply happen, and instead taking full ownership of one's existence. Universal search for meaning or a personal illusion. Is meaning something we uncover, like a hidden truth embedded in the fabric of the universe, or is it something we invent, a comforting illusion crafted by our own minds? This question lies at the heart of the human experience, our endless search for purpose, for a reason to persist, for a sense of significance in an otherwise indifferent cosmos. Some believe that meaning is universal, an absolute truth waiting to be discovered, while others argue that it is nothing more than a subjective construct, unique to each individual, and ultimately without objective reality. For centuries, religion, philosophy, and science have wrestled with this paradox. Many religious traditions insist that meaning is woven into the very nature of existence, bestowed by a higher power or cosmic force. In this view, life has an inherent purpose, whether it is to fulfill divine will, attain enlightenment, or progress toward a spiritual destiny. Such beliefs provide structure and reassurance, a guiding narrative that situates human existence within a grand, intentional design. Yet, as existentialist and absurdist thinkers argue, there is no clear evidence that such a universal meaning exists. The universe does not whisper its secrets to us, nor does it provide a clear blueprint for how we should live. If meaning is not something external and objective, then could it be nothing more than an illusion, a psychological necessity, rather than a cosmic truth? If one person finds purpose in love, another in ambition, and yet another in art, does that mean meaning is purely subjective, a self-created fiction that varies from person to person? This debate touches on something deeply unsettling, the idea that meaning might not be something we find, but something we impose. If meaning is merely a human invention, does that make it any less real? Can something be an illusion and still be essential? The pragmatist might argue that even if meaning is subjective, it remains valuable. It provides motivation, fosters resilience, and shapes our experiences in profound ways. After all, even if a story is fictional, it can still move us, inspire us, and give us purpose. Science adds another layer to this question. Evolutionary psychology suggests that our search for meaning is not cosmic but biological, a trait that helped our ancestors survive by giving them a sense of direction and cohesion. From this perspective, meaning is not a divine revelation, but a byproduct of our need to make sense of a chaotic world. If meaning is merely a cognitive adaptation, does that strip it of its significance, or does it make it all the more remarkable that we are capable of creating purpose where none inherently exists? The arts, literature, and philosophy all reflect this struggle. In the works of Franz Kafka, Albert Camus, and Samuel Beckett, we see characters lost in absurd worlds, searching for meaning where there may be none. Meanwhile, in spiritual traditions and poetic reflections, we find the opposite, the insistence that meaning is real, waiting to be unearthed through introspection, faith, or enlightenment. Even in modern culture, from existential films like The Matrix to deeply personal memoirs, we see this tension play out. Is meaning something we uncover, or is it something we create? Ultimately, whether meaning is universal or a personal illusion may be less important than the fact that we continue to seek it. Perhaps the very act of searching, of questioning, of wondering, of living as though meaning exists is what gives life its depth. And perhaps in that search, we each discover a meaning that is, if not universal, then at least profoundly our own. Existential void and the search for meaning. There are moments in life when everything feels hollow, when the things that once brought joy seem insignificant, when the routines of daily existence feel mechanical, and when the vastness of existence presses down, making us question if anything truly matters. This is the existential void, a psychological and philosophical state where meaning seems absent, leaving behind a feeling of emptiness. But what if this void is not a dead end, but a doorway? What if, rather than something to be feared, it is an invitation, one that pushes us to confront the fundamental nature of existence and discover meaning on our own terms? The existential void often emerges when illusions are stripped away, when deeply held beliefs are questioned, when societal expectations feel unfulfilling, or when life takes an unexpected turn, shattering previous certainties. It is in these moments of crisis that one is forced to ask, what is my purpose? Why do I exist? What truly matters? The search for meaning, then, is not a casual pursuit. It is born out of necessity, from the discomfort of not knowing. Philosophers such as Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus recognized this void not as a sign of failure, but as a defining aspect of the human condition. Sartre argued that we are condemned to be free without a predetermined essence. We must construct our own meaning. This freedom can feel overwhelming, leading to anguish, as we realize that every choice we make shapes our existence. Camus, on the other hand, saw the void as part of the absurd, the contradiction between our deep longing for meaning and the universe's silence. But rather than despairing, he suggested that embracing the absurd is an act of rebellion, a conscious choice to create meaning despite its uncertainty. Many spiritual and psychological traditions also acknowledge this emptiness, not as a flaw, but as an essential part of growth. In Buddhism, the concept of nayat emptiness is not about meaninglessness, but about letting go of rigid attachments to identity and external validation. In existential psychology, figures like Viktor Frankl emphasize that the void can be transformed by seeking purpose in relationships, creativity, or personal responsibility. Individuals can turn emptiness into a source of meaning. The arts have long explored this theme. In the novels of Dostoevsky, characters wrestle with the weight of existential doubt, searching for redemption and purpose. In modern cinema, films like Lost in Translation and her depict characters drifting through life, grappling with the realization that meaning is not given, but must be created. Even in music, from melancholic ballads to existential rock anthems, we hear echoes of this universal struggle, the longing to fill the void with something real, something personal. Ultimately, the existential void is not the end of meaning, it is the beginning of its pursuit. It is the space where illusions dissolve, leaving behind the raw potential to define one's own purpose. Whether through love, creativity, knowledge, or experience, meaning is not something we passively receive, but something we actively construct. The void, then, is not an absence, but an opening, an invitation to step forward and create a life that is truly our own. Ways to create one's own meaning. If meaning is not handed down from the universe, if it is not something we stumble upon, but something we must actively create, then how do we do it? How do we transform the uncertainty of existence into something deeply personal and fulfilling? The search for meaning is not a singular path, but a vast landscape with endless possibilities. Each individual must navigate this terrain in their own way, shaping a life that resonates with their unique experiences, desires, and values. One of the most direct ways to create meaning is through personal development, the commitment to growth, learning, and self-discovery. This is not just about acquiring skills or achievements, but about deepening one's understanding of oneself and the world. The more we expand our knowledge, challenge our perspectives, and evolve as individuals, the more we shape a sense of purpose that is uniquely ours. Whether it is through philosophy, science, literature, or introspection, the pursuit of wisdom itself can become a guiding force in life. Another powerful way to cultivate meaning is through art and creativity. Art is a form of rebellion against meaninglessness. It is the act of turning chaos into something beautiful, something expressive, something that outlives us. Whether through painting, music, writing, or any other creative pursuit, individuals can translate their emotions, experiences, and ideas into something tangible. Creativity allows us to shape reality, to leave an imprint on the world, and to connect with others on a deeply human level. Even for those who do not create art, engaging with it through literature, film, or music can serve as a source of inspiration and reflection. For many, meaning is found in contributing to something greater than oneself. This can take many forms: helping others, building communities, advocating for justice, or working toward a cause that aligns with one's values. The sense of fulfillment that comes from making a difference, even in small ways, is a testament to the human need for connection and purpose. Whether through acts of kindness, mentorship, or social change, shaping the world in a positive way can provide a deep sense of meaning. Equally important is the idea of building an authentic lifestyle, one that aligns with one's true self rather than societal expectations. Many people drift through life following predefined roles, adopting values imposed upon them rather than ones they truly believe in. The process of creating meaning often involves breaking away from these expectations and forging a path that feels genuine. This could mean choosing unconventional career paths, redefining success, or simply embracing one's own version of happiness, free from external validation. Relationships also play a central role in meaning making. Love, friendship, and deep human connections give life its richness. Meaning is often not found in solitary reflection, but in the bonds we share with others. Whether through family, romantic relationships, or a sense of belonging within a community, the shared human experience reminds us that we are not alone in our search for purpose. Ultimately, the creation of meaning is an ongoing process, not a destination. It requires conscious effort, adaptability, and the willingness to embrace uncertainty. There is no universal answer, only the individual's journey to craft a life that feels meaningful to them. And perhaps, in that very act of searching, of choosing, of shaping one's own narrative, we find the deepest meaning of all. The relationship between happiness and meaning. Is a meaningful life necessarily a happy one? Or can happiness exist without meaning? The relationship between these two concepts is complex, shaped by personal philosophy, cultural perspectives, and individual experiences. While some argue that meaning is the foundation of lasting happiness, others believe that happiness can be fleeting, momentary, and independent of deeper existential concerns. For many, meaning is seen as the key to fulfillment, providing a sense of direction and purpose that extends beyond temporary pleasures. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, argued that meaning is what sustains people through suffering far more than the pursuit of happiness itself. According to Frankl, those who see their lives as meaningful, even in difficult circumstances, are more likely to endure hardships and find long-term satisfaction. From this perspective, happiness is not simply about joy or pleasure. It is about living in alignment with a deeper sense of purpose. However, others argue that happiness and meaning are not necessarily linked. Happiness, in its simplest form, can be a momentary experience, a beautiful sunset, a shared laugh, a favorite song. These small joys do not always require a deeper purpose. Some philosophers, such as Epicurus, suggest that happiness comes from maximizing pleasure and minimizing suffering, rather than from seeking an overarching meaning. In this view, a person can lead a happy life without grappling with existential questions at all. Cultural perspectives also shape how people view this relationship. In Western societies, influenced by existentialist thought, the pursuit of meaning is often emphasized as the foundation of happiness. In contrast, some Eastern philosophies, such as Buddhism, suggest that detachment from both meaning and happiness, and instead embracing the present moment, is the path to inner peace. In some cultures, communal harmony and shared traditions provide meaning, while in others, individual self-actualization is prioritized. Psychological studies reveal that while happiness and meaning are related, they do not always overlap. Happiness is often associated with present-focused enjoyment, while meaning is linked to long-term fulfillment. For example, raising children may be deeply meaningful, but it is not always a source of happiness in the moment. It involves stress, sacrifice, and struggle. Similarly, pursuing a challenging career, creating art, or fighting for a cause may not always bring immediate joy, but they can provide a deep sense of purpose. Ultimately, the question remains, should one prioritize meaning, happiness, or a balance of both? Perhaps the key is recognizing that meaning and happiness serve different roles in life. Meaning provides a sense of coherence, direction, and legacy, while happiness offers moments of lightness, joy, and presence. The challenge is finding a way to integrate both a life where happiness is not sacrificed for meaning, and meaning is not overlooked in the pursuit of happiness. Fatalism vs. free will. The age-old debate between fatalism and free will is one that has captivated philosophers, religious thinkers, and scientists for centuries. Is everything in life predestined, a sequence of events determined by forces beyond our control? Or do we, as individuals, possess the power to make choices that shape our lives and destinies? This question lies at the heart of our understanding of human nature, ethics, and personal responsibility. Fatalism posits that every event, action, and outcome is predetermined by forces such as fate, divine will, or even the laws of nature. According to fatalists, the course of history and individual lives is already mapped out, and no matter how hard we try, the outcome will always unfold as it was destined to be. This belief suggests that all events, from the smallest personal decisions to global events, follow a fixed, unchangeable path. In this view, the concept of free will is an illusion. Our choices, no matter how freely we think we make them, are part of a grand, inevitable plan. The implications of fatalism on personal responsibility are profound. If everything is preordained, can we truly be held accountable for our actions? If a crime, for example, is destined to occur, or a tragedy is inevitable, do the individuals involved carry moral responsibility for their roles in it? Fatalism can be deeply disempowering, leading to a sense of helplessness. If everything is fixed, what purpose is there in trying to change or improve ourselves or our circumstances? In some ways, it can lead to a kind of resignation, a passivity, where people feel they cannot change their futures or take responsibility for their actions. In contrast, free will argues that individuals have the ability to make choices independent of external forces. This belief suggests that we are not simply actors on a predetermined stage, but rather authors of our own stories. Our decisions, big and small, shape the direction of our lives and influence the world around us. Free will empowers us to take responsibility for our actions and to strive for self-improvement, knowing that we can affect change through our choices. In this view, we are not victims of fate, but agents in our own right, capable of creating meaning, overcoming obstacles, and making ethical decisions. However, the notion of free will also raises questions about the extent to which we are truly free. Are our choices entirely independent, or are they shaped by factors such as genetics, environment, upbringing, and societal influences? If our decisions are heavily influenced by these external factors, can we still be said to have true free will? Some philosophers, known as compatibilists, argue that free will and determinism are not mutually exclusive, that while certain aspects of our lives may be determined by external factors, we still retain the ability to make meaningful choices within those constraints. The tension between fatalism and free will also has deep implications for how we understand moral responsibility. If our actions are entirely predetermined, can we be morally responsible for them? If someone is destined to act in a certain way due to factors beyond their control, how can we justly judge them? On the other hand, if we truly possess free will, then we are fully accountable for our actions, and the ethical weight of our decisions becomes even more significant. Religion also plays a central role in this debate. Many religious traditions espouse a belief in divine predestination, the idea that God has already determined the course of our lives. Christianity, for example, has long grappled with the tension between free will and divine sovereignty, with some sects emphasizing human choice and others focusing on God's predetermined plan. Other faiths, like Buddhism, emphasize the idea of karma, where one's actions lead to consequences, suggesting a more complex interplay between fate and choice. Ultimately, the debate between fatalism and free will touches on the deepest questions of human existence. Do we have the power to shape our own lives, or are we at the mercy of forces beyond our understanding? The answer, as with many philosophical questions, may not be clear-cut. Perhaps in the end, the struggle between fate and freedom is not about arriving at a definitive answer, but about the profound and often liberating journey of grappling with these ideas. Whether we believe our lives are governed by destiny or shaped by our choices, the way we navigate these questions defines much of what it means to be human. The influence of genetics, environment, and society on individual choices. Are our decisions truly our own, or are they products of forces beyond our control? This question lies at the core of the ongoing debate about free will and determinism. While many of us like to think that our choices are based solely on our personal desires, values, and reasoned deliberations, a closer examination reveals that genetics, environment, and society exert powerful influences on our decisions, often in ways we may not fully recognize. If these factors shape our thoughts, behaviors, and even our very sense of self, can we still claim that we have complete free will? Genetics plays a significant role in shaping our temperaments, cognitive abilities, and predispositions toward certain behaviors. From birth, we are endowed with a genetic makeup that influences everything from our basic personality traits to our intelligence, emotional responses, and even our likelihood of developing certain health conditions. Research has shown that some individuals may be genetically predisposed to conditions such as anxiety, depression, or impulsivity, which can, in turn, influence the choices they make. While we might not be slaves to our genetics, the foundational aspects of our personality and the way we react to the world are shaped by the genetic lottery we are born into. For example, a person born with a genetic predisposition toward high levels of stress or anxiety might make different decisions in life than someone who is genetically more predisposed to calmness or emotional stability. They may avoid certain situations or overthink decisions based on their underlying biological responses, limiting the scope of their perceived freedom in making choices. In this sense, our genetic makeup subtly influences the scope of options we feel are available to us and how we respond to them. Equally important is the environment in which we grow up. Family dynamics, cultural background, education, and early life experiences all shape the way we view the world and make decisions. The environment molds our values, belief systems, and even our understanding of what is right or wrong. For example, a person raised in a nurturing, supportive environment may have a vastly different sense of self-worth and confidence than someone raised in a neglectful or abusive setting. This affects their ability to make choices what they perceive as possible for themselves, what they believe they deserve, and what they fear. Family is often the first influence in shaping one's worldview. Parental attitudes toward education, work, relationships, and morality can profoundly affect a child's decision-making process. If children are taught to value certain behaviors or ideals, they may carry those beliefs into adulthood, making decisions that align with their upbringing. Conversely, those who experience trauma or neglect may develop coping mechanisms that shape their decisions in less constructive ways. Even education plays a role in shaping decision-making processes, as individuals exposed to different forms of knowledge and critical thinking tools may approach choices with different perspectives, biases, and priorities. Cultural norms also play a significant part in shaping individual choices. Every society has its own set of expectations and standards about what is considered acceptable or desirable. In some cultures, family loyalty might be prioritized above personal aspirations, while in others, individual success and autonomy may be emphasized. From fashion trends to career paths, the subtle and sometimes overt pressure of societal norms can limit the range of choices individuals feel they can make. A person raised in a culture that highly values conformity may feel less empowered to make unconventional choices or take risks, even if they personally desire to do so. Finally, society enforces a broad framework of laws, moral codes, and social expectations that often dictate the choices available to us. While individuals may experience some level of personal freedom, the reality is that societal rules shape and constrain our decisions in profound ways. Whether it's the laws that govern behavior, the expectations of our professional roles, or the financial limitations that dictate how we spend our time and energy, society imposes boundaries on what we can and cannot do. The economic system, for example, may limit our freedom of choice by creating financial pressures that influence career decisions, lifestyle choices, and even relationships. So, given the powerful role of genetics, environment, and society, can we still claim to have true free will? Many philosophers and psychologists argue that while we may not be entirely free in the sense of acting without influence, we still possess some degree of agency. We may not be able to control the genetic hand we're dealt or the conditions we are born into, but we can still make choices within those constraints. Moreover, many believe that awareness of these influences grants us greater freedom. By understanding the forces shaping our decisions, we can become more intentional in how we respond to them. The idea of free will then becomes less about absolute autonomy and more about personal responsibility and the ability to reflect on, understand, and adapt to the influences we face. Perhaps it's not a matter of whether we can make perfectly free choices, but whether we can recognize the forces that shape us and act in ways that reflect our deepest values and desires, rather than simply reacting to external pressures. Ultimately, the relationship between genetics, environment, society, and free will suggests that while our choices are certainly shaped by many factors, we are still active participants in the decision-making process. Our capacity to recognize and navigate these influences while striving to make choices aligned with our true selves might be where the essence of free will lies. Defining true freedom. What does it mean to be truly free? On the surface, freedom may seem like a straightforward concept, the ability to choose between different options, to act without interference, to do as we please. But the deeper we look, the more complex the idea of freedom becomes. Is true freedom simply the absence of external constraints, or does it require a deeper, more profound autonomy, one that frees us not just from the physical or societal limitations, but also from the biological and psychological forces that shape our desires and decisions? At its core, freedom is often equated with the ability to make choices. The idea that we are free when we can choose between different paths, whether in terms of career, relationships, or daily activities, is central to how most people understand personal freedom. The more options available to us, the more free we are, right? If we can act on our impulses and desires without being coerced, punished, or restrained, then we are truly free. This understanding of freedom is especially prominent in liberal societies, where individual choice is a key tenet of personal rights and liberties. The freedom to think, to speak, to move, to act, these are the markers of autonomy, and without them, many would argue, we are not free. However, a more philosophical perspective raises a deeper question. Can we truly be free if we are not free from the very forces that shape our desires and values? While we may have the legal and social freedom to choose, are we really free if our choices are constrained by our biology, upbringing, and societal conditioning? If our choices are shaped by genetic predispositions, cultural norms, family values, and past experiences, then are we truly making autonomous decisions, or are we simply responding to the forces that have shaped us? This view challenges the idea that freedom is just about having options. It suggests that true freedom requires us to rise above these external influences and act in alignment with our deepest, most authentic selves. One school of thought, particularly within existential philosophy, suggests that true freedom is the capacity to act in accordance with one's desires and values, but it also requires a conscious awareness of the forces shaping those desires and values. Existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre argue that freedom is about self-creation, choosing to live authentically, not merely conforming to external pressures or inherited beliefs. For Sartre, to be truly free is to take full responsibility for one's actions, knowing that we are not defined by our past or our circumstances, but by the choices we make in the present. In this sense, true freedom involves conscious decision-making, where we are not merely reacting to stimuli, but acting according to our inner will, and this requires deep reflection and self-awareness. On the other hand, some thinkers, particularly those with a deterministic outlook, argue that true freedom is an illusion. If our choices are influenced by genetics, upbringing, culture, and society, can we ever be truly free from these external forces? From this perspective, every decision we make is conditioned by factors outside of our control. Biological instincts, like the drive for survival or the need for social belonging, may shape our decisions more than we realize. Our societal conditioning, the values instilled in us by our culture, education, and family, might dictate our preferences, judgments, and actions. Even our emotions and desires can be seen as reactions to biological and environmental stimuli, not freely chosen paths. According to this line of thought, the very idea of freedom is called into question. If our choices are the result of forces we cannot fully control, can we ever be truly free? Moreover, even if we can make choices that align with our desires and values, how often are we aware of the forces that shape those desires and values? We may think we are freely choosing a particular career, for example, but how much of that choice is influenced by the cultural expectations around success, the influence of family, or the desire for financial security? In this sense, true freedom may not just be about the ability to choose, but about the awareness of our choices, the freedom from unconscious biases, and the capacity to make decisions that reflect our authentic self, free from the weight of conditioning. The tension between external constraints and internal autonomy leads to the critical question: is true freedom an attainable reality, or is it an ideal we can never fully achieve? Some would argue that while we may never fully escape the forces that shape us, we can still strive for greater freedom through awareness, introspection, and personal growth. True freedom, then, becomes not a perfect state of being, but a process, a continual journey of self-exploration, self-creation, and self-liberation. The more we understand the influences that govern us, whether biological, societal, or psychological, the more we can make choices that reflect our truest values and desires. In this sense, freedom may not be a destination or a final state of being, but rather a dynamic, evolving process. It is about cultivating the awareness to see the forces that shape us and the ability to navigate them, forging our own path within the constraints we face. True freedom, then, may not be about being free from all influences, but about becoming the most authentic version of ourselves despite them. It is, in many ways, the pursuit of authenticity in a world that constantly pulls us in different directions. The illusion of free will. The concept of free will, the ability to make independent choices, free from external constraints, has long been a cornerstone of human understanding of autonomy and responsibility. However, some philosophical schools, particularly determinism, argue that free will is merely an illusion. According to determinism, every event and action, including human decisions, is the result of preceding causes, whether those causes are biological, environmental, or social. This view challenges the belief that humans possess true autonomy in their choices, suggesting instead that all decisions are predetermined by factors beyond our control. At the heart of determinism lies the idea that the universe operates according to fixed laws of cause and effect. Every action, thought, and choice is the outcome of a chain of prior events. Imagine if we could know every single influence acting on an individual at any given moment, such as their genetic predispositions, their upbringing, their emotional state, and the cultural or social pressures they face. With such knowledge, determinists argue, we could predict a person's decisions with perfect accuracy. The choices we make, from the seemingly mundane to the monumental, would be nothing more than the inevitable result of a vast network of causes. If this is the case, then the idea of free will begins to unravel as we realize that our decisions are not independent, but are instead shaped by external and internal factors we may not fully understand or even be aware of. For example, take the decision to pursue a particular career. A determinist might argue that this choice is not made in a vacuum, but is influenced by a multitude of factors: the values instilled by one's family, the economic conditions in which one grew up, and the broader societal expectations regarding success and security. If we had complete knowledge of all these influencing factors, we could predict that choice with a high degree of certainty. This is a central idea in determinism. Our choices are not made freely, but are the product of the conditions and events that led up to them. In this view, individuals are not autonomous agents acting in the world, but rather conduits through which a series of causes play out. This presents a profound challenge to the notion of moral responsibility. If our choices are determined by factors beyond our control, our genetics, upbringing, and environment, then can we truly be held accountable for our actions? If someone commits a crime, for instance, is it fair to punish them if their behavior was the result of an abusive childhood, genetic predispositions, or social circumstances they had no control over? Determinism seems to imply that blame and praise are misplaced, as the individual's behavior was not truly the result of a free choice, but rather an inevitable outcome of prior causes. The idea that free will is an illusion can also have existential implications. Many people find comfort in the belief that they are in control of their fate, that they can choose their path, shape their destiny, and make meaningful decisions that affect their lives. If free will is a comforting illusion, it suggests that much of what we believe to be in our control is actually out of our hands. This realization can evoke feelings of powerlessness or despair. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable possibility that, despite our sense of independence, we are ultimately products of forces that we cannot fully control. This can undermine the belief in the individual as a self-directed agent and challenge the ideals of personal responsibility, achievement, and self-determination that many societies hold dear. However, this deterministic view does not necessarily imply that life is without meaning or purpose. While determinism can strip away the illusion of autonomous freedom, it opens the door to a more nuanced understanding of human action. If everything is determined by prior causes, we can still examine the causes that shape our behavior, such as the social conditions, cultural influences, or biological imperatives that guide us. Understanding the roots of our choices may allow us to be more empathetic toward others and more aware of the factors that shape our own decisions. In some ways, determinism shifts the focus from the idea of free will to the need for greater awareness and understanding of why we make the choices we do. One of the most compelling aspects of the deterministic view is that it forces us to reconsider the nature of human agency. If our actions are determined by factors beyond our control, it raises the question, what is the nature of personal agency? Can we still act meaningfully within a deterministic framework? Some philosophers, like compatibilists, argue that even in a world governed by cause and effect, we can still have a form of freedom as long as we act in accordance with our desires and values, even if those desires are ultimately influenced by prior causes. This is known as compatibilism, the idea that free will and determinism can coexist. According to compatibilists, while we may not be entirely free from the forces that shape us, we can still be responsible for our actions if we act according to our internal motivations, rather than being coerced or forced into a particular action. In conclusion, the argument that free will is an illusion challenges our assumptions about human nature, responsibility, and agency. While it may be unsettling to consider that our choices are not entirely our own, this view provides an opportunity to rethink how we understand control and agency. It encourages us to look more deeply at the factors that influence our decisions and to embrace a more complex and compassionate view of human behavior, one that acknowledges the interplay of biological, environmental, and societal forces in shaping our lives. Whether or not we accept determinism as the final answer, the debate over free will invites us to explore what it means to be truly free and whether that freedom is ever fully attainable. Psychological and neurological perspectives on free will. The concept of free will has been a long-standing cornerstone of philosophy, ethics, and psychology, representing the idea that individuals are capable of making choices independent of external or internal determinants. However, recent findings from neuroscience and psychology have cast doubt on this traditional understanding of free will, suggesting that much of our decision-making might occur outside of conscious awareness, raising the question, can we truly be free if many of our decisions are shaped by unconscious neural processes? One of the most significant challenges to the notion of free will comes from neuroscientific research, particularly studies investigating the timing of conscious decision-making. One of the most famous and controversial studies in this field is that of Benjamin Libet, a neuroscientist who conducted experiments in the 1980s that suggested the brain initiates motor actions before the individual consciously becomes aware of their decision to act. In his study, participants were asked to make a spontaneous movement, such as pressing a button, while their brain activity was monitored using EEG electroencephalography. Libet found that neural activity in the brain occurred several hundred milliseconds before the participant consciously decided to press the button, suggesting that the brain decides to act before the individual is aware of it. This finding challenges the traditional understanding of free will as the conscious, deliberate exercise of personal choice. If our brains are preparing to take action before we are even aware of it, what role does conscious thought play in decision-making? Are we merely observers of our actions, rather than active participants in the process? Libet's results seem to imply that much of our behavior, even actions that we believe are freely chosen, may actually be determined by unconscious neural processes that precede conscious awareness. This raises significant questions about the degree of control we actually have over our own actions. However, Libet himself was cautious about the implications of his findings. While his research suggested that the brain initiates decisions before we are consciously aware of them, he proposed that there is still a window of opportunity for conscious intervention. He suggested that while the brain may start preparing for action ahead of time, individuals still have the ability to veto or stop the action before it takes place. In what he termed the veto power, this means that, although our unconscious brain processes may guide our actions, we can still exercise control over our choices by consciously deciding to stop or redirect our behavior at the last moment. The question remains, however, whether this kind of conscious veto power truly constitutes free will, or whether it is simply a small measure of control within an otherwise deterministic system. If much of our behavior is being shaped by unconscious neural activity, to what extent are our decisions actually ours? Are we truly in control, or are we simply reacting to neural impulses that have already been set in motion before we even become aware of them? Beyond Libet's experiment, further research in neuroscience and psychology has revealed that unconscious processes play a larger role in our behavior than we might like to admit. For example, studies have shown that our brains are constantly processing vast amounts of information below the level of conscious awareness, sorting through sensory inputs, memories, and experiences to help us navigate the world. These unconscious processes, which are influenced by genetic predispositions, early life experiences, and social conditioning, can shape the decisions we make without us realizing it. For instance, implicit biases, automatic, unconscious associations we make about people, objects, or ideas, can influence our decisions in ways we are not fully aware of. Our behavior can be influenced by these hidden biases, even if we consciously reject them. This suggests that much of our behavior may be shaped by neural activity and experiences that we do not consciously control. In light of this, we might begin to question the extent to which free will exists if much of our behavior is governed by unconscious processes we cannot directly access or change. On the other hand, some psychological and neuroscientific perspectives argue that free will can still be understood as the ability to exercise control within the constraints of unconscious processes. According to this view, while many of our actions may be influenced by unconscious neural activity, we still have the capacity to make choices that are informed by our conscious reflection, desires, and goals. This perspective suggests that true freedom is not an absolute, unconditioned liberty to choose, but the ability to make choices that are self-directed, even if those choices are shaped by both conscious and unconscious forces. Psychologist Daniel Wegner, for example, explored the illusion of free will in his work, suggesting that we may experience a sense of agency because we interpret our actions as the result of our conscious intentions, even though much of our behavior is actually guided by unconscious neural processes. In this view, the experience of free will might be an illusion constructed by the brain, a narrative that makes sense of the decision-making process and helps us feel like active agents in the world, even when our actions are largely driven by unconscious influences. So, can we truly be free if much of our behavior is shaped by unconscious neural activity? The answer depends on how we define freedom. If we see freedom as the complete absence of influence, then true free will may be an unattainable ideal, since our decisions are always, in some sense, shaped by unconscious processes. However, if we understand freedom as the ability to reflect on and make choices based on our conscious desires, values, and goals, then there is still room for autonomy within the framework of unconscious neural activity. In conclusion, the findings from neuroscience and psychology challenge the traditional view of free will, showing that much of our decision-making occurs before we are consciously aware of it. While this suggests that conscious control over our actions may be more limited than we think, It also opens the door to a more nuanced understanding of freedom. True freedom may not be the ability to act completely independently of external or internal forces, but rather the capacity to exercise control over our decisions within the context of these influences, and to reflect on and choose our responses to the unconscious forces that shape us. Cultural and social constraints on freedom. While the concept of free will suggests that individuals should have the freedom to make their own choices, this ideal is often complicated by the cultural and social structures in which we live. Societal pressures, cultural norms, laws, and expectations play a significant role in shaping the decisions we make, often constraining our ability to exercise true autonomy. From the moment we are born, we are immersed in a system of influences: family expectations, societal values, economic status, and political structures that can dramatically impact the scope of our choices and the degree of freedom we experience. This brings us to an essential question. Can true freedom exist in a world full of these cultural and social constraints? Is freedom only possible within specific social and political contexts, or can it transcend these limitations? Cultural norms and societal expectations are often the most invisible yet powerful forces that shape our decisions. From the clothes we wear to the careers we pursue, much of our behavior is influenced by the expectations and values of the culture we are part of. These norms can be overt, like laws that regulate behavior, or subtle, like unwritten rules about what is considered acceptable or respectable. For example, in many cultures, individuals face pressure to conform to gender roles, adhere to traditional family structures, or follow prescribed career paths. Those who deviate from these norms often face judgment, exclusion, or even punishment. For instance, in societies where economic success is seen as the primary measure of personal worth, an individual who chooses a non-traditional path, such as pursuing an artistic career or opting for a life of minimalism, might feel societal pressure to justify their choices, or even risk being ostracized for not conforming to these expectations. These types of pressures limit the choices available to an individual, even if they desire to act according to their personal desires or values. The question then arises, are individuals truly free to choose their own paths, or are they bound by the invisible chains of cultural and societal expectations? Laws and regulations also play a crucial role in constraining personal freedom. In any society, laws govern everything from the way people can express themselves to the types of activities they can engage in. While laws are essential for maintaining order and protecting individuals' rights, they can also limit freedom in ways that may feel restrictive or oppressive. In some authoritarian regimes, for example, laws may severely restrict freedom of speech, religious expression, or political dissent. In these environments, individuals may find their choices circumscribed by the state in ways that feel almost impossible to escape. Even in democratic societies, the law may impose limits on individual freedom, such as restrictions on personal behavior, for example, laws against drug use or certain sexual practices. These legal structures make it clear that freedom is not absolute. While individuals in democratic societies may have the freedom to speak their minds or choose their careers, they are still bound by laws and policies that shape the range of permissible actions. In this way, true freedom is often a balancing act between personal desires and societal limits. The question remains, can true freedom exist when laws and cultural norms restrict the range of choices an individual can make? Beyond cultural norms and laws, social and economic status also plays a critical role in shaping an individual's freedom. People from privileged backgrounds, those with wealth, education, and access to resources, often experience a broader range of choices in life compared to those who face economic hardship. A person born into a wealthy family, for example, might have the luxury of choosing a career in the arts, traveling the world, or starting a business, all without worrying about the financial pressures that would hinder someone from a lower socioeconomic background. In contrast, individuals from marginalized communities may face significant obstacles in exercising their autonomy. Economic disparities limit access to opportunities such as education, healthcare, and career advancement, leaving people with fewer choices. Even in seemingly democratic societies, social inequality can limit the actual freedom individuals have to make meaningful decisions about their lives. In such cases, while the ideal of freedom may be upheld on paper, social and economic constraints often prevent it from being fully realized in practice. Political systems are another crucial factor in shaping freedom. In some countries, political regimes may offer varying degrees of personal freedom. While democratic nations typically allow citizens to participate in political decision-making, speak freely, and engage in peaceful protest, more authoritarian governments often restrict these rights to maintain control. In totalitarian regimes, for example, political dissidents may be imprisoned, or individuals may be forced to conform to state-approved ideologies. Under such circumstances, individuals may face significant limits to their ability to exercise free will, as their choices are dictated by the state, rather than by their own desires or values. These political constraints raise an essential philosophical question. Is true freedom only possible within certain political structures, or can it transcend the limitations imposed by society? Some argue that freedom is inherently tied to political and social structures, suggesting that only in societies that protect civil liberties and individual rights can true freedom be achieved. Others, however, contend that freedom can exist within any system, arguing that true autonomy comes from the internal capacity to make choices, regardless of the external circumstances. One perspective suggests that freedom is not necessarily about the absence of constraints, but rather about the ability to act authentically within those constraints. For example, individuals living under oppressive regimes may still experience a form of freedom if they can find ways to express their true selves, form meaningful relationships, or engage in personal projects that align with their values. This suggests that internal freedom, or the ability to make choices based on one's own desires and values, may be possible even in the most limiting environments. Ultimately, the question of whether true freedom exists within cultural, social, and political constraints is complex. While many factors certainly limit the scope of our choices, there is still room for personal autonomy and self-determination within those limitations. True freedom may not be the complete absence of social, economic, or political constraints, but the ability to navigate and make meaningful decisions within the structures that define our lives. Whether freedom is something that transcends these limitations or exists only within particular conditions depends on how we define freedom itself. Is it the absolute absence of constraint, or the ability to act meaningfully within the constraints we face? The paradox of freedom. The paradox of freedom is an intriguing and complex dilemma, one that has both puzzled and fascinated philosophers for centuries. It lies at the intersection of two seemingly contradictory truths: our desire for autonomy and the undeniable influence of factors beyond our control, such as genetics, society, and unconscious processes. On one hand, we experience a profound sense of personal responsibility, agency, and choice in our daily lives. On the other, we recognize that much of our behavior, decisions, and preferences may be shaped by forces outside of our conscious awareness or control. This tension between our sense of freedom and the constraints that influence us forms the essence of the paradox of freedom. At the core of this paradox is the fact that free will, the ability to make decisions independent of external forces, seems to exist in a world where those same external forces significantly shape our choices. For instance, we know that our genetics influence our temperament, predispositions, and even our susceptibility to certain behaviors or emotions. Our society and culture shape the very framework within which we understand right and wrong, desirable and undesirable. These social forces dictate acceptable behavior, often constraining the ways we perceive our choices. Even our unconscious processes, driven by years of experiences, memories, and psychological conditioning, guide many of the decisions we make, often without us realizing it. Yet, despite this, we still feel as though we are free to make choices whether they are small, like what to have for dinner, or larger, like which career to pursue. This raises an essential question. Are we truly free? If our choices are shaped by forces outside of our control, can we ever really claim ownership over them? The answer is complex, and perhaps it lies in understanding that freedom is not an absolute, but a relative concept. True freedom might not mean total liberation from all external influences, but rather an awareness of those influences and the ability to make deliberate, conscious choices despite them. In other words, freedom could be understood as the capacity to choose consciously, even when unconscious forces or societal pressures are at play. Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre have argued that while we may not be free from all constraints, we are always free to make decisions within the context of those constraints. This is known as existential freedom, the notion that even when the choices available to us are limited, we still retain the freedom to choose how to respond to them. Sartre's idea suggests that even in the face of oppressive social norms, challenging circumstances, or inner conflict, we always have the freedom to choose our attitude and how we interpret and engage with the world around us. In a more modern context, psychological freedom comes into play. Psychological theories have suggested that true freedom involves the awareness of unconscious patterns, the thoughts, habits, and conditioned responses that arise without conscious thought. Becoming aware of these patterns allows individuals to break free from them, granting a degree of autonomy over one's choices. Mindfulness and other self-awareness practices promote this kind of freedom by teaching individuals to recognize their internal biases and assumptions, helping them to make more conscious and authentic decisions. Thus, psychological freedom can be seen as the ability to transform unconscious influences into conscious choices, empowering us to live with greater intentionality and self-awareness. However, even with this awareness, the tension between our autonomy and external influences remains. Society often plays a crucial role in shaping our sense of what is possible or acceptable. For example, cultural norms can impose limitations on how we express ourselves, who we associate with, or even what goals we pursue in life. Economic realities, political systems, and historical contexts also play significant roles in determining the choices we face. It is often easy to feel trapped by these larger societal forces, as though our freedom is stifled by the structure of the world around us. And yet, individuals continue to push against these boundaries, challenging societal expectations and striving for autonomy in ways that transcend the constraints imposed upon them. In this way, the paradox of freedom might not be resolved in an absolute sense, but in how we navigate the complexities of our lives. Perhaps the most empowering realization is that freedom is not an all-or-nothing state, but something we cultivate incrementally by understanding the forces that shape us and using that awareness to make more conscious decisions. Freedom, in this sense, is an ongoing process of personal growth and self-discovery, one where we continue to expand the boundaries of what is possible for ourselves, whether that is in our relationships, careers, or understanding of our own desires. Ultimately, whether we are truly free remains a question that challenges both philosophers and everyday individuals. As we delve into the nature of freedom, we may come to understand that freedom is not a destination, but a journey toward greater self-awareness, responsibility, and the ability to make conscious choices despite the constraints that surround us. The paradox may never fully be resolved, but it may be this very tension between choice and constraint that drives us to continually seek greater autonomy, both within ourselves and in the world around us. Communication barriers between people. Communication is the cornerstone of human connection, yet despite its significance, it is often hindered by various barriers that prevent people from truly understanding one another. These barriers can take many forms, ranging from language differences to emotional states, and even the medium through which we communicate. Understanding these barriers can help us navigate them more effectively and foster more meaningful interactions. One of the most obvious communication barriers is language differences. When people speak different languages, even the most well-intentioned messages can become muddled or lost in translation. Even when a shared language exists, individuals may still struggle with regional dialects, slang, or technical jargon, which can lead to confusion. Misunderstandings arise when a person assumes that words hold the same meaning across different contexts, cultures, or backgrounds. Cultural misunderstandings also pose significant obstacles to effective communication. Every culture has its own norms, values, and social expectations that influence how people communicate. These differences may include everything from the level of directness in speech to nonverbal cues such as gestures, eye contact, and personal space. What is considered polite or respectful in one culture may be perceived as rude or dismissive in another. For instance, in some cultures, silence is a sign of thoughtfulness, while in others, it may be seen as uncomfortable or evasive. Without an understanding of these cultural nuances, well-meaning communication can quickly lead to misinterpretations. Beyond external factors, emotional states play a crucial role in how people communicate. When individuals are stressed, angry, anxious, or upset, they may struggle to express themselves clearly, or they may misinterpret the intentions of others. Emotions can create barriers by clouding judgment, causing people to speak or act impulsively without considering the full impact of their words. Additionally, when one person is emotionally charged, it can trigger defensive responses in the other person, further escalating the breakdown in communication. In such cases, empathy becomes essential for bridging the gap and restoring meaningful dialogue. The inability to express oneself clearly is another barrier to effective communication. Sometimes, even when we know what we want to say, we struggle to find the right words, or we feel that our thoughts are too complex to communicate succinctly. This can create frustration on both ends of the conversation, with one person feeling misunderstood and the other feeling incapable of conveying their message. In addition to this, language proficiency can also be a factor. For instance, a non-native speaker might have difficulty articulating certain ideas or concepts, making the communication process more challenging. Nonverbal communication is often just as important as, if not more important than, spoken words. Body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice all contribute to the message being conveyed, but these cues can sometimes be misread or overlooked. For example, a person may say one thing, but their body language, crossed arms, avoiding eye contact, or a tense posture might convey something entirely different. Similarly, a statement delivered in an angry or sarcastic tone can completely change the meaning, regardless of the words used. Understanding the subtleties of nonverbal communication is crucial for ensuring that the message is not only received, but truly understood. In today's digital age, communication has become increasingly mediated by technology, which can create additional barriers. In face-to-face interactions, people can rely on visual cues and tone of voice to interpret the emotions behind words. However, in virtual communication, whether through emails, texts, or social media, these cues are often lost. Written communication can easily be misinterpreted because readers do not have access to the speaker's tone, body language, or facial expressions. For example, A short, seemingly curt message may be intended as a simple response, but without the context of the person's facial expression or tone, it might come across as rude or dismissive. Emoticons and emoji are often used in an attempt to convey emotion, but even these can be misinterpreted depending on cultural or personal differences. Finally, there's the issue of listening. Communication is a two-way process, yet many times, one person is focused on formulating their own response while the other is speaking, rather than actively listening. Poor listening can lead to misunderstandings and missed opportunities for connection. Active listening, which involves truly focusing on the speaker, asking clarifying questions, and reflecting back what has been heard, can help overcome many of the barriers to effective communication. Ultimately, these communication barriers are a reminder that true understanding requires more than just words. It requires awareness, empathy, and an openness to the perspectives of others. As people become more aware of these barriers, they can work to reduce misunderstandings and foster stronger, more meaningful relationships, whether in personal interactions or across cultural and technological divides. The full conveyance of emotions and thoughts. One of the most profound challenges in human communication is the struggle to fully convey the depth of our emotions and thoughts. Emotions and thoughts are not just simple reactions or ideas. They are complex, layered, and deeply personal. Each individual experiences the world through a unique lens, shaped by their own history, cultural context, and personality. As a result, when we try to express our inner world, whether it be the pain of grief, the warmth of love, or the weight of anxiety, the words we choose often fail to capture the entirety of our emotional experience. This mismatch between what we feel and what we can communicate can create a sense of frustration or loneliness as we yearn to be understood but struggle to find the right language to explain ourselves. Take grief, for example. Grief is not just a single emotion. It's a blend of sadness, longing, confusion, guilt, and sometimes even anger. When someone is grieving, they may feel as though they're drowning in a sea of emotions, unable to make sense of their inner turmoil. How can one word or phrase capture the complexity of losing someone or something deeply important? Even with the most carefully chosen words, grief often feels inexpressible, and those who grieve may feel isolated, unable to share the true weight of their emotions with others. Similarly, love, one of the most universally experienced emotions, is often difficult to articulate in its full depth. Love is not a singular emotion. It evolves in shifts, ranging from romantic passion to familial affection to love for a friend or even a pet. It involves layers of connection, vulnerability, and affection that can't easily be summed up in a sentence. People may try to express their love with grand gestures, tender words, or physical affection, but even then, the internal experience of love often feels beyond words. This inability to fully convey love can lead to feelings of unappreciation or misunderstanding, especially when loved ones struggle to communicate their feelings in return. Anxiety is another emotion that resists easy expression. The constant undercurrent of unease, the racing thoughts, and the physical symptoms, these are things that can be difficult to explain to others, especially when they aren't visibly evident. People often describe anxiety as an overwhelming sense of fear or nervousness, but this definition doesn't begin to touch on the complexity of the emotional experience. It might involve fear of the unknown, fear of failure, or a deep sense of vulnerability, things that can vary greatly from person to person. For those who struggle with anxiety, articulating the intensity of their experience can feel impossible, which often leads to a sense of disconnect from others who may not understand the extent of their internal struggle. What makes this even more challenging is that language itself can be limiting. Words, by nature, are static symbols for dynamic, ever-changing experiences. While language can offer us a way to bridge the gap between ourselves and others, it cannot always capture the full range of human emotions. We might use metaphors, analogies, or descriptive language to try and express something complex, but even the most beautiful or eloquent phrasing often falls short. For instance, we might say that we feel like we're drowning in sadness or flying high with joy, but these comparisons can never fully encompass the real intensity of what we're feeling. Language can point to the experience, but it cannot embody it entirely. This inability to fully communicate our thoughts and emotions can create a deep sense of isolation. We may feel like no one truly understands us, as if we are speaking a different language from those around us. Even when others try to empathize, there is always the sense that they cannot truly grasp the full weight of our internal world. In this way, communication becomes an imperfect tool, one that can bring us closer, but often leaves us feeling like we are still adrift in a sea of personal experiences that cannot be shared in their entirety. Yet, this gap in communication does not necessarily mean that understanding is impossible. Often, the key to bridging the gap lies in active listening and empathy. When someone opens up about their emotions, it's not just about the words they say, but about how those words are received. Active listening involves not only hearing the message, but also making an effort to understand the emotions behind it. Empathy, too, plays a crucial role. While we may not fully understand the depth of another person's emotions, simply acknowledging their feelings without judgment can create a space for connection and understanding. In this way, even when our words fail, our presence and care can help others feel seen and heard. Moreover, nonverbal communication, such as body language or physical touch, can also convey emotional depth in ways that words cannot. A gentle touch on the shoulder, a compassionate gaze, or a warm hug can communicate understanding and solidarity in a way that language alone might not achieve. These nonverbal cues help fill in the gaps, providing context and emotion that words may leave out. Ultimately, the process of conveying emotions and thoughts is a shared endeavor, one that requires both the speaker and the listener to approach with patience and understanding. The complexity of our emotional experiences may never be fully expressible, but through compassionate communication, we can create spaces where people feel safe enough to share their innermost selves, even if those words are imperfect or incomplete. In that shared space, understanding and connection can flourish, even when words fall short. Coping with inner loneliness. Inner loneliness is a subtle yet powerful form of isolation that can persist even when we are surrounded by people. Unlike physical loneliness, which is simply the absence of others, inner loneliness is the feeling that we are not truly connected to those around us. It's the deep sense of being misunderstood, overlooked, or emotionally distant from others, despite being in their presence. This type of loneliness can arise from many factors: emotional disconnection, a lack of meaningful relationships, or the belief that no one truly understands the depth of our inner world. It can be especially painful because, on the surface, life may appear fine, but within, we are struggling with a feeling of being adrift, separated from everyone else. Coping with inner loneliness can be incredibly challenging, as it is an emotional and psychological experience rather than a physical one. The feeling often exists in a space between wanting connection and fearing vulnerability, leading to a cycle of isolation and longing. However, there are various strategies that individuals can use to navigate this complex and deeply personal experience. One effective approach is self-reflection. Taking time to understand the root causes of inner loneliness can help individuals gain insight into why they feel disconnected. This process may involve asking difficult questions such as, what is it that makes me feel so alone? Am I afraid of being truly seen? Do I fear rejection, or am I simply not allowing myself to be open with others? Self-reflection can provide clarity and help individuals identify patterns in their thoughts and behaviors that might be contributing to their feelings of isolation. Through this exploration, individuals can begin to identify what they truly need from relationships and what they might be avoiding. Another powerful tool for coping with inner loneliness is seeking therapy or counseling. Talking with a trained professional can provide a safe and supportive space to express feelings that may be difficult to articulate to others. Therapists can help individuals work through the emotional barriers that prevent them from connecting more deeply with others, and can offer coping strategies for managing loneliness. Therapy can also aid in addressing underlying issues, such as self-esteem, fear of intimacy, or unresolved past trauma, which might be fueling the experience of inner loneliness. Through this process, individuals often come to understand that they are not alone in their feelings. Many others share the same struggles, and there are ways to move through and heal from them. For some, creative outlets such as writing, art, or music can be incredibly therapeutic in expressing complex emotions. These forms of self-expression allow individuals to externalize their feelings and give them a voice, even when they find it hard to communicate verbally. Writing in a journal, for example, can provide an emotional release, helping people work through their feelings of loneliness and better understand their emotional landscape. Art can serve as a visual representation of the inner world, offering a way to process emotions that words may fail to capture. These activities also create a sense of accomplishment and personal growth, helping individuals reconnect with themselves and their emotions in a constructive way. Interestingly, solitude can also be a tool for coping with inner loneliness, but it requires a shift in perspective. While prolonged isolation can deepen loneliness, solitude, when chosen intentionally, can become a space for personal growth and self-discovery. In solitude, individuals can reflect on their needs, desires, and values, gaining clarity about who they are and what they want from their relationships. Solitude can also help people develop a sense of inner peace, allowing them to nourish their own mental and emotional well-being without the constant pressure to seek external validation. It can be a time to rediscover passions, engage in hobbies, or simply enjoy one's own company. When approached with mindfulness, solitude can be a healing and restorative experience, enabling individuals to feel more at ease with themselves. Of course, while solitude has its benefits, meaningful relationships are essential to mitigating inner loneliness. Finding individuals who share similar experiences or who understand your emotional landscape can be incredibly healing. Building relationships based on authenticity, vulnerability, and mutual understanding creates a foundation where people can truly connect on a deeper level. When we feel seen and understood by others, it alleviates the burden of loneliness. These relationships provide a sense of belonging and reassurance that we are not alone in our experiences. Even just knowing that there are people who are willing to listen without judgment can help alleviate feelings of isolation. Engaging in community, whether through support groups, clubs, or online platforms where people share common interests, can also help individuals connect with others who may have similar struggles. Sometimes, just knowing that there are others who are walking a similar path can provide comfort and diminish the feeling that we are isolated in our loneliness. Finally, it is important to recognize that healing from inner loneliness is not an overnight process. It requires time, patience, and consistent effort. There may be setbacks along the way, but by employing strategies such as self-reflection, therapy, creative outlets, intentional solitude, and building meaningful connections, individuals can gradually move from isolation to integration, from loneliness to a more connected, fulfilling life. It is a journey of understanding both oneself and others, of learning to value and nurture the relationships that bring true emotional fulfillment. Ultimately, inner loneliness can feel like a deep, solitary struggle, but it is possible to cope with and overcome it. By taking steps to connect with oneself and with others, individuals can find a sense of belonging and emotional fulfillment that transcends the feeling of isolation. The role of empathy in understanding others. Empathy is one of the most powerful tools in human connection. It acts as a bridge, closing the distance between individuals who may otherwise feel isolated or misunderstood. At its core, empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person, to see the world through their eyes, and to experience their emotions as though they were your own. This act of emotional resonance creates a bond that transcends mere words, fostering deeper, more meaningful connections. However, empathy is not always easy to achieve. It requires more than just hearing someone's words or acknowledging their situation. It demands a level of active engagement and openness to the other person's experience. The first step in empathizing with someone is active listening, being fully present in the moment, and tuning into not only what they are saying, but also how they are saying it. This means listening without judgment, interrupting less, and offering a space where the other person feels heard and valued. It's the act of paying attention not just to the content of their message, but also to their emotional cues, such as tone of voice, body language, and the subtleties of their expression. Empathy also requires the willingness to step outside of our own perspective and put ourselves in someone else's shoes. It means temporarily setting aside our own thoughts, biases, and emotions in order to connect with the other person's reality. This can be challenging, especially when the experiences or emotions being shared are unfamiliar or uncomfortable. Yet, it is precisely in these moments of discomfort that empathy holds the potential for the greatest growth. By actively engaging with someone else's experience, whether that's the pain of loss, the fear of uncertainty, or the joy of achievement, we expand our own emotional understanding, developing a more nuanced and compassionate view of the world. Without empathy, misunderstandings and misinterpretations often occur, and emotional distance can deepen. When we fail to empathize with others, we risk reducing their emotions to something we cannot understand or relate to, which can make them feel invisible or unimportant. In situations where people are already feeling lonely or isolated, the absence of empathy can exacerbate these emotions. A lack of empathy often leaves individuals feeling as though their emotions are being dismissed, ignored, or misunderstood. This emotional invalidation can lead to a sense of emotional disconnection, reinforcing feelings of loneliness and alienation. On the other hand, when empathy is present in a conversation or relationship, it creates a sense of being seen and heard, a powerful antidote to loneliness. By expressing empathy, we communicate to the other person that their feelings are important, their experience is valid, and their emotions worthy of recognition. This helps to create an emotional safe space where individuals can share their vulnerabilities without fear of judgment or rejection. Feeling understood, even in moments of pain, can be incredibly healing. Empathy has the potential to make people feel deeply valued, seen for who they truly are, and accepted without the need for pretense. Building empathy also requires a continuous effort to expand our emotional literacy. It's about learning to recognize emotions in ourselves and others, and developing the skills to express that understanding. It's not just about words, but about embodying empathy through actions, whether it's offering a comforting touch, a listening ear, or a validating comment that shows we truly understand. Empathy can transform relationships, making them feel more authentic and meaningful. It strengthens trust and enhances communication, creating connections that are grounded in mutual respect and emotional attunement. Moreover, empathy is not a passive act. It is an active choice. To build deeper connections and foster understanding, we must consistently choose to put ourselves in others' shoes, to ask open-ended questions, and to listen with intention. When we make this effort, we not only alleviate the loneliness of others, but also enrich our own emotional lives. By truly connecting with someone else's feelings, we create an environment where vulnerability is safe and where emotional intimacy can flourish. In broader societal contexts, empathy plays a crucial role in community building and conflict resolution. In a world that can sometimes feel divided, empathy allows us to bridge differences, whether they are cultural, social, or ideological. It enables us to find common ground with others, even when our experiences or perspectives may be vastly different. By approaching others with empathy, we are better equipped to understand their needs and concerns, making it easier to work together towards solutions that benefit everyone. In sum, the role of empathy in communication cannot be overstated. It is the key to creating deeper, more authentic connections with others, and can be the difference between emotional isolation and meaningful intimacy. Whether in close relationships, professional settings, or society at large, empathy allows people to feel understood, valued, and supported. By practicing empathy, we not only foster connection, but we also nurture a more compassionate world where the emotional experiences of others are honored and shared. The digital age and the crisis of authentic communication. The digital age has radically transformed the way we communicate, allowing for instant connectivity across the globe. Platforms like text messaging, email, social media, and video calls have revolutionized how we stay in touch with friends, family, and colleagues. While these tools offer unparalleled convenience, they also come with significant limitations, particularly when it comes to fostering authentic connections. As we increasingly rely on digital means to communicate, the depth and richness of face-to-face interactions are often sacrificed, leading to a crisis in authentic communication. One of the primary drawbacks of digital communication is the absence of physical presence. In face-to-face conversations, a significant portion of communication comes from nonverbal cues, body language, tone of voice, eye contact, and facial expressions. These cues allow us to gauge emotions, empathy, and nuances in a conversation, helping to create a fuller, more connected experience. In contrast, digital communication, especially through text-based platforms, strips away these vital elements. As a result, messages can be misinterpreted, emotions may be diluted, and the connection can feel flat or detached. Moreover, emotional exchange is often compromised in digital communication. The immediacy and convenience of texting or posting on social media may allow for rapid responses, but it does not create the same level of emotional intimacy that face-to-face interaction does. In person, we can directly observe the emotional reactions of others, whether it's a comforting smile, a reassuring touch, or shared laughter. These moments foster a sense of closeness and empathy, reinforcing our emotional bonds. Digital interactions, however, tend to be more transactional, lacking the nuance that builds authentic connection. The rise of social media, in particular, has created a unique paradox: superficial connection amidst the illusion of being constantly surrounded by others. On platforms like Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, we share snippets of our lives, often highlighting the best moments, creating a curated version of reality. While these updates may generate likes, comments, and shares, they can also contribute to a false sense of connection. Despite the outward appearance of being connected to hundreds or even thousands of people, many individuals feel more isolated than ever. Social media can magnify feelings of loneliness, as people may scroll through posts, watching others' lives unfold while feeling disconnected from their own reality. In many cases, the overload of information on digital platforms can exacerbate this emotional distance. The constant flow of updates, notifications, and opinions can overwhelm individuals, leaving them with a sense of emotional fatigue. This constant consumption of content can make it harder to discern meaningful connections from the noise. Rather than engaging in deep, reflective conversations, people may find themselves reacting to surface-level content, which doesn't fulfill the emotional or psychological needs for meaningful connection. The superficiality of online interactions can also lead to miscommunication or a lack of true understanding. Without the ability to hear tone or see body language, it becomes easier to misunderstand messages or overlook the emotional context behind someone's words. A simple text message or comment can be read in multiple ways, leading to potential conflicts or feelings of being misunderstood. This lack of clarity in communication can create barriers between people, making it difficult to form genuine relationships. To combat these challenges, it's essential to take a conscious step back from the digital realm and prioritize meaningful, face-to-face communication. While digital tools will continue to be a part of our lives, it's crucial to recognize their limitations and not allow them to completely replace more intimate forms of interaction. In-person conversations offer the opportunity to engage in deeper, more thoughtful exchanges where emotional responses are fully expressed and understood. Furthermore, active listening and being fully present during these interactions is key. In the age of distractions, it can be easy to check our phones or think about something else while conversing, but giving our undivided attention to the person in front of us signals to them that they are truly heard and valued. These authentic connections help to combat the loneliness and emotional disconnect that often accompany digital interactions. Additionally, it's important to recognize that quality over quantity is what matters in communication. While social media platforms might offer an endless stream of interactions, it's the depth of those interactions that truly enriches our emotional lives. Building genuine relationships requires vulnerability, active participation, and emotional investment, things that can't always be conveyed through a status update or a like on a post. In conclusion, while the digital age offers convenience and an array of communication tools, it has also introduced a crisis of authentic communication. The lack of physical presence, body language, and emotional exchange can leave people feeling emotionally disconnected and increasingly isolated. By making a conscious effort to engage in more meaningful, in-person interactions, we can foster deeper connections and counteract the loneliness that often arises from our reliance on digital communication. True connection, after all, is about more than just exchanging information. It's about sharing emotions, understanding each other's experiences, and building relationships that are grounded in genuine human presence. Social masks and the inability to be truly seen. In our daily lives, many people unconsciously wear social masks, carefully crafted personas designed to present a version of ourselves that aligns with societal expectations, norms, or the desires of others. These masks can take on various forms: the confident, successful professional, the carefree, fun-loving friend, the polite, agreeable companion. These personas allow individuals to navigate different social settings, avoiding vulnerability and the fear of judgment or rejection. However, while these masks may help protect us from discomfort, they often prevent authentic connection with others. The act of wearing a social mask is, at its core, a defense mechanism. It's a way to protect our inner selves from potential harm, be it criticism, misunderstanding, or rejection. We hide our flaws, insecurities, and true feelings behind a mask that appears more acceptable or idealized. Yet, in doing so, we create a barrier between our true selves and the people around us. Authentic communication becomes nearly impossible when we are not willing to reveal our true identity. We become trapped in the performance of an image, constantly navigating the delicate balance of projecting a version of ourselves that feels safe, but is ultimately inauthentic. The more we hide behind these social masks, the more disconnected we become from others. This disconnection is not just physical but emotional. leading to a sense of loneliness and isolation. Loneliness in this context is not just the absence of others, but the feeling of being unseen, of being misunderstood, or not fully known. When we present a version of ourselves that is polished or constructed, it becomes difficult for others to truly understand who we are. We may feel like we're surrounded by people, yet they don't know us on a deep emotional level. This can breed a sense of alienation, as we long for the opportunity to be truly seen and accepted for who we are, without the masks and pretenses. The inability to be authentic in relationships, whether with friends, family, or colleagues, can create a deep sense of internal conflict. On the one hand, there's the desire to connect, to build genuine and meaningful relationships. On the other hand, there's the fear of exposing ourselves and facing the vulnerability that comes with being truly known. We might feel as if we're living in a constant state of self-protection, fearing that revealing our true emotions, desires, or struggles might result in rejection or judgment. The result is often a cycle of emotional isolation, where we long for connection, but prevent it from happening by keeping our real selves hidden. To break free from this cycle, it requires both courage and trust. It's about the willingness to take down the mask and allow ourselves to be seen for who we truly are, flaws and all. This act of vulnerability is not easy, as it demands confronting our fears of being judged, misunderstood, or rejected. It takes strength to expose our true selves, knowing that not everyone may accept or understand us. But it is through this act of authenticity that genuine communication can flourish. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and honest about our feelings, struggles, and experiences, we open the door to deeper connections. We invite others to do the same, creating a space where mutual understanding, empathy, and trust can grow. Building authentic relationships means sharing not just the highlights of our lives, but also the difficult moments, the moments when we feel scared, sad, or uncertain. When we let others into our world, including our flaws, fears, and imperfections, we create a stronger bond built on mutual respect and shared vulnerability. It's this honesty that fosters a deeper understanding and emotional intimacy, where both people feel truly seen and valued for who they are, rather than the version of themselves they feel they need to project. Of course, being vulnerable doesn't mean revealing everything to everyone. Authenticity involves making the choice to share the right parts of ourselves with the right people, those who have earned our trust, and who will treat our vulnerabilities with care and respect. It's important to remember that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a strength, as it requires emotional courage and the ability to embrace uncertainty and potential discomfort. However, by practicing vulnerability in our relationships, we slowly build the confidence to let down our masks and let others see us for who we truly are. In the context of relationships, the absence of social masks can allow for mutual understanding and deeper emotional connection. People who are comfortable with showing their true selves are more likely to be surrounded by others who appreciate them for who they really are, not for the persona they feel they need to maintain. These authentic connections help alleviate the feelings of loneliness and disconnection that come from wearing social masks, allowing us to form relationships that are both emotionally fulfilling and meaningful. In conclusion, while social masks may offer a sense of protection or acceptance in the short term, they create a barrier to true communication and genuine relationships. The inability to be authentic often leads to a feeling of loneliness, as we long for connection, but find it difficult to be fully seen or understood. Overcoming these masks requires courage and trust, but it is through vulnerability and authenticity that we create the deep, meaningful connections that we truly crave. By letting go of the need for perfection or approval and embracing our true selves, we allow others to see us for who we are, flaws and all, and in turn, open the door to true intimacy, understanding, and emotional connection. Loneliness in crowds, the paradox of social isolation. Loneliness is often associated with being alone, but a deeper, more insidious form of isolation exists that can occur even when we are surrounded by people. This paradox of loneliness in crowds arises when individuals, despite being in the presence of others, feel emotionally or mentally disconnected. It's a strange, almost surreal experience. You're in a room full of people, sharing the same space, but you might feel like you're invisible, unheard, or entirely alone. The crowd, far from offering companionship, can amplify feelings of isolation because it highlights the absence of meaningful connections. This phenomenon occurs for various reasons. One key factor is the lack of deep connection. Simply being in the same physical space as others does not guarantee emotional or social fulfillment. For instance, at large social gatherings, like parties or public events, individuals may interact with numerous people, yet these interactions might remain surface-level casual greetings, small talk, or fleeting exchanges. These types of interactions, while they may offer brief moments of distraction, do little to nurture a sense of genuine understanding or belonging. The quality of relationships is far more important than their quantity. Many people, despite being surrounded by family, friends, or coworkers, may feel deeply misunderstood or disconnected from those around them. They may struggle to find individuals who truly empathize with their thoughts, feelings, or experiences. This emotional gap creates a sense of loneliness, even in the busiest environments. The loneliness in these situations is not a physical absence of people, but rather an emotional absence of understanding or connection. Moreover, modern society, with its fast-paced and often superficial modes of interaction, exacerbates this sense of isolation. The rise of social media has created an environment where individuals are constantly in contact with others, yet still feel profoundly lonely. The virtual nature of communication can lack the intimacy and depth of face-to-face conversation, often leading to misinterpretation or the inability to convey emotions effectively. In many cases, individuals can scroll through social media and see others interacting, celebrating milestones or sharing moments, yet still feel left out, invisible, or unseen. This paradox, being surrounded by people, yet feeling disconnected, is often intensified by the internal feeling of misalignment with the crowd. Perhaps we feel that no one truly understands us, or that we are unable to express our true selves. We might maintain social connections, but they may not provide the meaningful interactions that fulfill our emotional and psychological needs. It is possible to feel trapped in a web of casual relationships that lack the depth to soothe feelings of inner loneliness. Another factor contributing to loneliness in crowds is the sense of invisibility that some individuals experience. Many people go through life feeling like they are not truly being seen for who they are. Their emotions, struggles, or desires might be ignored or overlooked, not because of malice, but because of the superficial nature of many social interactions. In these situations, even when surrounded by others, individuals may feel that their true self is hidden from view, contributing to a sense of emotional isolation. The paradox of social isolation in a crowd brings to light the critical need for authentic communication and connection. Genuine, meaningful relationships are not about the number of people we know or the frequency of our social interactions. They are about the depth and authenticity of those interactions. Empathy, understanding, and shared experiences are at the core of building these relationships. Without these, even the most crowded environments can feel suffocating and lonely. In order to combat this loneliness, it is crucial to seek out deeper connections with others, relationships where vulnerability, understanding, and trust can flourish. This might mean seeking quality over quantity in our social circles, fostering environments where people feel safe to be their authentic selves. It also requires a willingness to step outside the constraints of social expectations and superficial norms, to engage in conversations that truly matter, and to express oneself honestly and openly. Additionally, the mindfulness of our own emotional needs and the courage to reach out to others for support plays a vital role. It's important to recognize when we are feeling emotionally disconnected and take the necessary steps to break through that isolation, whether it's through starting deeper conversations, finding common ground, or simply seeking out those who can offer us the emotional connection we crave. Ultimately, loneliness in crowds serves as a powerful reminder that it is not the number of people around us that determines our emotional well-being, but the depth of our connections with those people. True connection requires more than just proximity. It requires empathy, vulnerability, and an authentic exchange of emotions. In a world where superficial interactions often dominate, we must actively seek and cultivate relationships that allow us to be fully seen, heard, and understood. Only then can we overcome the paradox of loneliness in a crowd and experience the true comfort of meaningful connection. Healing loneliness through connection and meaningful communication. Loneliness, at its core, is a profound feeling of isolation that emerges not from physical solitude, but from the lack of meaningful, authentic connections with others. In today's world, where people are often surrounded by technology and social media, but still feel emotionally disconnected, the need for genuine communication has never been more urgent. To overcome loneliness, it's essential to foster deep connections, the kind where individuals feel seen, heard, and understood. The first step in this process is creating spaces that encourage free expression, where people feel safe to share their innermost thoughts and emotions without fear of judgment or rejection. These spaces could be physical, like intimate conversations with loved ones, or virtual, where individuals seek out communities that value authenticity and empathy. Authentic communication begins with the simple yet powerful act of listening. When we listen actively, with full attention, and without interrupting or jumping to conclusions, we make others feel valued. Active listening creates an environment where both parties can express their vulnerabilities and deepest feelings. To heal loneliness, it's not enough to just speak. It's equally important to listen with empathy, to understand the emotions behind the words and connect with the person's experience. Empathy transforms ordinary exchanges into profound moments of understanding, allowing people to bridge the gap between their inner worlds. Through empathy, we communicate a deep sense of care that goes beyond words and touches the heart. It's this emotional exchange, this sense of truly being understood, that counters loneliness. Moreover, vulnerability plays a crucial role in combating isolation. When we open up about our fears, insecurities, or struggles, we allow others to do the same, which fosters an environment of mutual respect and shared humanity. This kind of interaction does not just relieve loneliness in the moment. It nurtures long-lasting connections. Vulnerability creates the conditions for authentic relationships, where individuals are accepted for who they truly are, and not for the image they project. It's in these moments of honest communication that true companionship is formed. The idea that we can heal loneliness through meaningful communication speaks to the fundamental human need for belonging. By fostering relationships rooted in trust, empathy, and emotional openness, we create opportunities for connection. This connection doesn't just alleviate loneliness, it provides a sense of purpose, understanding, and solace in the presence of others. It reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles, and that there is always someone willing to listen, understand, and walk alongside us in our journey. Healing loneliness also involves recognizing that meaningful communication is not just about sharing words, but about creating an emotional resonance between individuals. It's about connecting through shared experiences, finding common ground, and offering each other support. When we truly listen and empathize, we begin to understand the nuances of each other's lives, allowing us to cultivate meaningful relationships that stand the test of time. These relationships provide the emotional nourishment that helps counteract the feelings of isolation that often accompany loneliness. Finally, building and maintaining meaningful communication is an ongoing process. It requires effort, patience, and vulnerability. It may not always be easy, and there will be moments of discomfort. However, as we continue to invest in relationships founded on empathy and openness, we create a support network that can help us face the challenges of life. Meaningful communication, at its core, is about creating a deep connection that transcends the superficial and reaches into the heart of what it means to be human. In conclusion, overcoming loneliness through connection and meaningful communication is not just about filling the silence or having more interactions. It's about cultivating relationships where individuals can truly express themselves and feel valued. By creating spaces for vulnerable, empathetic conversations, and by building relationships founded on trust and understanding, we can bridge the gap between isolation and connection. In doing so, we allow ourselves to heal from loneliness and experience the profound solace that comes from being seen, heard, and understood.